Port truckers and warehouse workers in Los Angeles and Long Beach are striking over a range of issues, from wage theft to misclassification as independent contractors to employer intimidation and bad and unsafe working conditions. Truckers are striking at PAC 9 with picketing at the ports, warehouses, and distribution centers. Shaharya Kauchi is co-director of the Warehouse Workers Resource Center. He says warehouse workers are suffering under low wages and bad working conditions while moving goods for some of America's biggest retailers.
They have to show up every day to find out if they have work, and if they don't have work, they're sent home. They're unpaid. They have a very dangerous workplace. The warehouse was built in the 1940s and is poorly maintained. Workers have gotten injured on the dock because it's poorly maintained. Forklifts are badly maintained. They filed a Cal/OSHA complaint around this issue. We're calling on other unions and organizations across the region and community to support these workers.
Kauchi says since these workers are on City of Los Angeles property, they should be getting the city's higher minimum wage. And he says huge retailers like Amazon, Lowe's, and others can afford to pay these workers properly and maintain good working conditions.
These workers are moving goods for really big companies. Amazon has a reputation for moving things very quickly and efficiently. Other companies like Lowe's and Kmart are on the site. Also, huge retailers who can afford to pay to make sure that these workers do have good conditions. And the least they can ask is decent wage, a safe workplace, and to be able to know every day if you have a job waiting for you.
Hillary Clinton has been endorsed for president by the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America. Clinton welcomed the support and says as president she will support unions. She vowed to always stand with unions like the UBC against employer efforts to misclassify workers and steal wages, and against Republican assaults on collective bargaining and the right to organize. Clinton is also endorsed by the American Federation of Teachers, Roofers, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, and the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry. Union buster Scott Walker's presidential campaign has been busted. The Wisconsin governor claims he was called to lead by quitting the presidential race. Less than 1% support in the polls and running out of cash also had a little to do with it. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says Walker is still a disgrace, just no longer national. The Wisconsin AFL-CIO says the American people have unmistakably rejected Scott Walker's anti-union brand.
Let's get America working. We must build, maintain, and repair our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Teamsters support a bipartisan approach to creating good jobs for American workers. Learn more at letsgetAmericaWorking.com. Teamsters strong, America stronger.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The Pope in the area. Big day today for at least my Catholic friends, and I think working people across the country because of the message that the Pope brings, and hopefully the unity that he will bring along with it. Also going to talk a little bit about the big budget here, maybe some some papal intervention, if you will, here in the when he arrives in the city of brotherly love. Maybe get some people. What's it been? 3 months now, no budget. And look, you go, oh, we're 3 months. We're 3 months over. I don't know what it became. They haven't done a budget in 3 months. No, they had from the beginning of the year. In fact, last November when they won their elections and all of that stuff started. Okay, coming up, the budget. It's on the calendar. We all had it written on the calendar. We all had it there going, this is the day you got to get your job done. It would be like me going, folks, I would love to come here. I would love to talk to you every day, but you know what? I just decided I'm not going to do it for the next 3 months. And then talk about what I would have talked about 3 months ago. It's kind of dumb. And it's kind of just amazing to me that we've allowed it to happen. Also going to talk a little bit today about the future of travel, some bizarre little bits popping up, and also the future of education as nothing surprising on the education front, but lots to get to. Now, yesterday, you may remember, we talked about the Senate workers, the workers in the Senate cafeteria. I shouldn't say cafeteria because it's not. It's a dining hall. And the chef who wrote just an amazing piece that the Guardian published, and we talked about a guy named James Powell. He's a guy who prepares Marco Rubio his $19 fancy salad, and Lindsey Graham his $20 fancy salad, and all of this. But here's a guy who makes $13 an hour. At one point in his life, homeless with his child, because $13 an hour in D.C., I don't even know would get you a cardboard box under the bridge. So what they're calling for is, look, in federal contracts, because evidently this company that this guy works for is one of these global behemoths that makes huge money, and they make huge money off of what? Cheating workers out of their pay. And this is one of those things where they're going, look, we just want a fair shake. We just want to be rewarded for the work that we do, and the work that we do valued. Look, they do a service. They beckon to the needs of our millionaire class of representatives and senators. And to be honest, these folks got families to feed too. So what they've done is they said, look, with they're striking for better wages, better hours, better conditions, and the right to have some rights. So they were hoping to meet with the Pope while the Pope was at the White House. They were hoping that just a minute with the Pope, to say, hey, this is. They didn't get the Pope. Let's cut right to that. They got someone though. They got Bernie Sanders, which is again another reason why I like Bernie Sanders. While the Pope, Pope's got a real tight schedule, and I do understand it. Bernie's a guy who he put on the comfortable shoes. He's out there walking the picket lines. And if you remember, as I've said, one of the reasons that I supported Obama from the very beginning was this was a guy who said, when there's something going on, I'm going to be there. Going to put on my comfortable shoes. Going to walk the picket line. Now, here's the thing. Over the last several years, there have been numerous times. In fact, I've offered to buy him some comfortable shoes. And I will buy him comfortable shoes if he will walk on the picket line, if he will walk on the line of workers who have been locked out. I will buy the shoes. And I'm sure that if they were really expensive shoes, I'm sure our listeners would chip in to buy him the best comfortable shoes just to go out there and stand with working people. And this is where I think Bernie is the guy. I can't tell you how many emails I get from folks going, did you see this picture of Bernie flying coach from one campaign stop to another? He's not one of them. And I think that's why Bernie's gotten such a good response from folks, because he is that guy that could live next door. He is that guy that and I've met him numerous times. We've had him here on the program numerous times over the years. A good, genuine fighter kind of guy, the kind of Democrat that I've been saying for the longest time, the party needs to coalesce around. As I've said, got to be a million times, the Democratic Party lost the white working class voter. They lost people like me because they didn't appear to be that person you'd want to get into a street fight and have on your side. Bernie's that guy who, you know what, if he needs to pop you in the mouth, he's going to do it. And I like that about him. He's gruff. He's not going to take you know what from anyone. And that's a good thing. But he's not so pig-headed and so one-sided that he's not going to listen. And this is where the right, my generation of white working class voter has gone to I want the crazy guy who I want on my side in the street fight, but who's just completely insane. Who it's my way or the highway and always looking for a fight. That's the problem. While I've been saying, look, the Democrats need to grow a set, maybe get a rod or something, maybe not a steel rod, but something, maybe some flexible tubing. I don't know. But something of a spine. They need to stand up and, every once in a while you need, as the old man always said, every once in a while you need to smack somebody upside the back of the head, make a citizen out of them. And there's part of me that goes, absolutely. We need that kind of a politician who's going to stand on his principles and walk with striking workers and put himself out there. Now, understand the folks who were striking, they had a procession to where the Pope was. They went actually to the Capitol. They had their prayer action in the hopes that President Obama will push and for a $15 an hour minimum wage. And more importantly to me, something he could do this minute would be to do that $15 an hour minimum wage for federal contractors, especially in DC. I mean, that's something that simply could be fixed. But what gets me, and this is when I had a bunch of folks email me last night going, it's not surprising that on both sides of the aisle, you have people eating in those dining rooms, being taken care of and served and all of that by people who are living difficult lives. And the people there don't have any clue or really any concern. And when you see John Kasich saying things like, well, that's why we leave a tip. Maybe you need to leave a little better tip then. If that's the case, if that's how you're going to do it, we got some work to do. Now, I've always been against the whole idea of the tip, and internationally, not something that's done, actually an insult in a lot of countries. I've always been in the mindset, the person who's serving you, the person who's doing the work, they should be paid a living wage and not be forced to rely on your benevolence. Or if you're having a good day, or if the waitress smiled at you in the right way and you think, hey, I might have a shot at getting her number. No, that's not how it should be. So I'm hoping with the Pope's visit, the hope is that maybe we start talking about some of these issues. And as the Pope's here and all of the traffic nightmares that are going to be going on, hopefully something comes out of it other than we were just really badly inconvenienced in a lot of places. And I know a number of my friends in DC, they are staying home. Can't get to work. In fact, it was explained to me there's like a 4-mile radius where you can't drive. Everything is you got to walk, which is wow. There you go. Because we've got to make sure that crazy people don't do insane things. How sad is of a testament is that? But I wanted to throw that out right from the start. Good on Bernie. You know who I didn't see out there? Any Republicans. I didn't see any of them out there. I didn't see anyone talking about these issues. We heard a lot about, we care about the middle class, right? Not these issues, because these aren't the middle class folks, right? They should be, though. Let's take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit about the budget that has turned kind of into a pie fight, and maybe a little bit more. Eddie Day Pashinsky is going to be here to talk to us. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Red roses too, I see them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. President Richard Milhous Nixon issued the Philadelphia Plan. The goal of the plan was to require building trades unions to admit black members into their ranks. Nixon believed this would show him as a civil rights supporter without having to give in to the more radical demands of the civil rights movement. Affirmative action opponents sued to kill the plan, but they were unsuccessful. Prior to the introduction of the Philadelphia Plan, construction unions nationwide were almost exclusively white. Throughout the 1960s, black workers organized to demand access in construction trades in many northern cities. In Philadelphia in 1967, black workers protested to integrate construction work. This led to federal attention and Nixon's plan. The plan required 6 Philadelphia building trades to create numerical goals for integrating their locals. They had to meet those goals to get federal contracts. Many white construction workers nationwide opposed the plan. Construction workers in Pittsburgh and Chicago held protest rallies. In practice, Nixon had very little interest in strong enforcement of his plan. He wanted to use it to defend himself when critics attacked his administration's civil rights record. Civil rights leaders saw through Nixon's charade. Real progress in desegregating construction work was very slow, and the Nixon administration did little to change that. Still, Nixon's plan was a step, however small, at integrating the building trades. Another important step was the founding of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists in September of 1972 in Chicago. Today, the organization has members in more than 1,200 locals and works to increase and support black members of trade unions. Today, integration of the trades remains an incomplete project. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. A government shutdown looms as congressional Republicans fight to block federal funding for Planned Parenthood. But who do you think paved the way for a government shutdown with uncritical and untrue attacks on the women's health organization? Here's Fox News' Bill O'Reilly.
Planned Parenthood should be defunded. Period. I don't want my tax dollars going to that.
Fox News' Martha McCallum also claimed that the misleading videos justified reconsidering Planned Parenthood's federal funding on America's newsroom.
This has raised so many questions because the existence of these videos and the horrible pictures that we all saw yesterday, which nobody wants to have to look at, but they do demonstrate the facts of how these procedures are done. And it raises a question about who we are, what's important to us, and what we're willing to fund. $500 million to Planned Parenthood.
This campaign against Planned Parenthood is a prime example illustrating the pipeline from right-wing media talking points to congressional ideas. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
'Cause he's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone, in a diamond.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So here we are, the budget long overdue, not quite seeing the kind of urgency that one would hope to see out of our Republican leadership, both in the House and Senate. And if you saw the governor last week, if you saw the clip, really somebody very angry at being, basically dismissed out of hand with what I consider two enormous compromises, two just gigantic, or to use the Donald Trump, two huge kind of compromises, and yet dismissed out of hand. you got to think if you're the old Republican leadership, they snatch it and they run like giddy schoolgirls. But not these folks. And it's bizarre to me. And here to talk a little bit about the budget, where we go, what's going on, our good friend, Pennsylvania State Representative Eddie Dave Pashinski. Eddie, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure, Rick.
So, I'm looking at this and, the governor comes out. You can visibly ticked off because I got to be honest. I think what he laid out from what he said were ideological handoffs going, okay, I'm going to give you about 70, 80% of what you want. And they didn't take it and run. I guess I should be shocked, but I should not be, right?
Well, I think that, no, you should be shocked. And I think most people are shocked because I think they've recognized that Governor Wolf has traveled this state gathering information from the people, what their concerns were. Then he put together a budget that was based upon their concerns. That was his campaign. He said he wanted to reduce the property taxes. He said that he wanted to make sure the Marcellus Shale paid what they're supposed to pay. He was willing to reduce corporate taxes. I mean, he did everything that he heard from the people. And from day one, that governor has led with an olive branch. He went to the Republican majority, to the leadership, to the Democrats. He met with them individually. He met with the leaders individually. He met with small groups, bipartisan, individual. I mean, this governor wants to fix Pennsylvania and get us set for the next 10, 20 years. We cannot continue the way we've been budgeting because it's all been smoke and mirrors, rob from Peter to pay Paul. So, yes, he has every right to be upset, and the people have every right to be upset. I don't think the people in Pennsylvania totally realize that when we don't have a budget, because of what the Republicans have presented, which is a Corbett budget, which is $1.5 billion in the hole after their total superiority in Harrisburg, that costs every American citizen money. We're losing about $1.5 million, $1.75 million every day that we do not have this budget. That is not good fiscal management.
It's not.
And and think about it. The Republicans have been in charge of the House, the Senate, and the governor over the last 4 years, and they put us $1.5 billion in the hole, and they want to take us down that path again. Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. But, we were told that if we did all of that draconian budget cutting, all of the tightening of the belt, that if we slashed funding for education $1 billion a year and fired some 20, 30,000 education professionals, that somehow that was going to make us move in the right direction. But all it seemed to do was take us further down the rabbit hole and make us worse off.
You're 100% correct. And it also transferred the cost and the responsibility to the locals who have less resources than the state. So that's why you saw a lot of property taxes going up, because the schools were struggling, trying to maintain their staff, trying to maintain some quality education. They have contracts and commitments that they have to make too, and they weren't getting the support from the state. So their formula has proven over the last 4 years it does not work. Now, it didn't work because they didn't tax Marcellus at a reasonable, fair level. And I'll let everyone try to figure out what that is. But by and large, if we were to tax them at a reasonable level, we would have an additional $1 billion in our treasury. We lost that.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this, though, because I think most people that I talk to think, we've got to find whatever that number is. Somewhere, we don't want to be the highest. We don't want to be the lowest. We want to be somewhere with everybody else around the country who does this. But how do you negotiate with people? And you're sitting in these rooms. How do you negotiate with your colleagues who don't believe we should be taxing it at all, and that this is one of those no compromise issues? This is what I think the people of Pennsylvania need to wake up to. The folks that Republicans put into power, these are people who are ideologically opposed to putting any tax on it. Basically just go, here, take the asset and go.
Well, again, you're correct. It's all of the Republicans that supported Corbett in this plan. Corbett's no longer there, so it's just the Republicans that are continuing to support, the gas industry. Again, a fair tax. If it's 5%, if it's 4.85, if it's 4.7, whatever that fair tax is, that's the people's resource they deserve to be getting those dollars in to help with the resource that we need here in Pennsylvania.
No, as my one neighbor told me, it should be no less than what West Virginia gets, because we shouldn't be pulling West Virginia down. See, that just makes sense to me. If everybody else has got, you should be in that same ballpark. You don't want to be way out so far that maybe they're right, and the drillers will go to China to do the China plan to drill all the way through the earth to get to Pennsylvania's gas. But you got to get something.
Well, again, you're 100% correct, and that's not only the logical thing to do, it is the fiscally prudent thing to do. So we have various resources that we are not tapping or we are not fixing, and that's unconscionable. Now, most of the time you think that the Republicans are supposed to be the good business people. Well, the way they've managed the state, they are far from that. So look, the governor has laid out a legitimate plan. One, if you do the tax on Marcellus, that's going to help fund schools. That's going to help reduce your property taxes to some degree. If you're able to maneuver and balance your PIT, your sales tax, and your property tax, you're going to be able to balance it so that it's not an overwhelming burden for any aspect, any section of our electorate. And right now, the property tax in most areas has been truly, truly onerous. So by balancing your PIT and your sales tax, you're able to reduce the property taxes.
Right.
And I know in my area, most of my folks here are going to get a 50% reduction in their property tax, which is sizable. It's considered $870, I believe it is.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Eddie, and I think everybody agrees no one should lose their home because they can't pay their property taxes. But at the end of the day, you still have to have enough revenue coming in to support your schools, to support your whatever it is, the plowing of the roads, the paving of the roads, the police departments, the fire, but all of that stuff that our tax dollars pay for. And I think this is where, when the governor came out with his budget proposal, I said, look, this is a big boy budget. This is saying that we need to have revenue. These are our priorities, and it's got to come from somewhere. But what I find most of my Republican friends talking about is saying, I don't want to pay property taxes. I don't want to pay any more sales tax. I don't want to pay any more of this. And the corporations shouldn't have to pay either. And I go, well, where do you think this money is going to come from to educate our kids or pay a police department? Where do you think that comes from? Just the government ferry?
Again, you're 100% correct. And that's why I use the word balance. Because if we take the taxpayers' dollars and we manage it appropriately and we utilize it the way it's supposed to be, then it should be no oversized burden on any segment of the population. So by not charging the Marcellus industry a fair tax, I already said we lost $1 billion that you're not going to make up. We lost it forever. Now that's unconscionable. Rick, we are overpaying Charter Cyber School. The funding formula there needs to be revised.
Yep.
Those schools need to be funded appropriately, not overfunded. That's $600 to $800 million. If we would have modernized the liquor stores like we tried to do 4 years ago, we would have had an additional $400 to $600 million more. Rick, add it up. That's between $2 billion and $2.4 billion we could have had that we didn't get because we couldn't get the R's to make those changes. We were willing to do those changes.
That's nuts.
That is unconscionable.
It is unconscionable. And on the shale tax, one of the things that I tried to explain to folks is, that's money that's tax dollars going into our coffers that Pennsylvanians not necessarily are paying. My wife's got a relative who lives out in Alaska. And every year they get, their oil check. They get their check from the government saying, here's your portion of what the rest of the country bought in oil, and here you go.
That's their royalty, right?
Right, and they fund all of their education and all of their stuff with this money that everybody else in the country is paying for them. And I go, doesn't it just make some sense? Okay, they're going to they're going to take it out of the ground. We're going to bear all of the external costs, and it's going to go all over the country, and they'll pay the tax, whatever it is, and we'll reap the benefits. Makes sense.
Well, Rick, the people of Pennsylvania that buy gas are paying that severance tax, that sales tax on that gas to whether it's Texas, whether it's Oklahoma, whether it's Louisiana,
Exactly.
wherever we're buying our gas from, our citizens are paying for it. So look, let's not fight each other. The bottom line is we have some resources here that if we manage them appropriately, no one gets hurt. We don't want to hurt business, but we certainly don't want to hurt the taxpayer. And we certainly don't want to hurt the senior citizen who does not have the kind of revenue necessary because of the fact of their status. So it's balanced. And right now we are out of balance. The governor's trying to put us in balance, and the Republicans need to realize they have one more trick that they're going to try to prove. Okay? If you remember, we blew all of July because the Republicans wanted to do a budget override.
Right.
That didn't work. So then they tried to do, in all of August, we spent that whole month in a line-by-line budget override. That didn't work. And now in September, they're going to waste the time and money, and they're going to try to do a stopgap measure. And by the way, it's pretty hypocritical. I mean, the R's are the ones that cut and slash these budgets of Health and Human Services 4 years ago, kept them slashed and cut 3 years, 2 years last year. And now, all of a sudden, they want compassion, and they're going to try to show how they care about these people. They're the ones that cut the living bejesus out of them.
Yep.
You know, and this is nothing but hypocrisy. It's time for us to come together, get at the bargaining table, negotiate honestly and appropriately, get a budget that we both sides can live with, and help the people of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but you know, as I look at this, what's frustrating to me, and look, I give you credit. I couldn't do your job because you know, while we don't have a budget, and while school districts are struggling, and as you've pointed out, you know, human service departments, their budgets have been slashed, and we've got, you know, poor people and seniors and people in this Commonwealth suffering. We've got idiotic politicians going, hey, let's waste a day talking about making Pennsylvania an English-only state. Really? I mean, at some point, don't we just have to go, there's a problem here? And it's
there is a problem here, and the people have got to wake up. They've got to see who they've elected, and the people are the ones who are going to have to start banging on their doors. It's time for the protest. It's time for everyone to put the pressure on the Republican leaders and both sides, but right now it's the Republicans that have been stymieing this whole thing, and say, cut the baloney, let's get to work here, and let's move Pennsylvania forward. If we don't get the pressure from the people, a lot of these guys, you know, have a feeling as though they're untouchable. You know, I'm embarrassed as a politician right now. I'm embarrassed as a representative when I know we could have a legitimate, fair, and reasonable budget, when I know we have a governor that is bent over backwards for the Republican majority, and all they've done is stuck their finger in his eye. But it's not in his eye. They stuck their finger in every Pennsylvania citizen's eye, because they don't seem to care about the average citizen who's paying the taxes and who's having to deal with the suffering.
Last line of questioning here, Eddie. You've been at this a fairly long time, right?
Well, I'm in my 9th year. I'm honored to serve, but it is very frustrating. It doesn't have to be this way. I mean, we have to look out for the good of the country. We have to look out for the good of Pennsylvania, look out for the good of the people. The same kind of paralysis that's in Washington because of this idiotic ideological hassle is now done us in here in Pennsylvania. The same plan to stymie progress on a national basis has now worked its way into Pennsylvania.
And that's what I was going to ask you, because, you know, over your time, have you seen this change? Because as sitting in this chair, being an observer, I've seen the same kind of forces that were in Washington that have paralyzed Washington, D.C., work their way to the state level through the ALEC affiliates and, of course, the ACE groups that are now propping up and all of the Koch money that's coming into Pennsylvania. This is what I think is causing a good portion of our divide, where you can't have Republicans anymore who are willing to reach across the aisle and take what was really the governor's proposal, in my view, was a giant gift. It was what they wanted, but it wasn't enough. And if it wasn't enough, they couldn't take it, which just kind of bizarre to me. But have you seen that kind of a shift?
I definitely have. There's entirely too much money, big money, that's influencing the direction of government. There are a lot of good Republicans. I have a lot of good friends and colleagues on the other side of the aisle that I work with on many issues, and they're just as frustrated as I am. But when the power of the dollar is now forcing them to take a vote that they don't like because of the fact that if they don't do what they're supposed to, the Republicans themselves will put another opponent against one of their own.
Yeah.
It becomes a tenuous situation at best. And it's robbing the people of their power of their vote. Now it's going to be up to the people again to find the strength to challenge, those bad actors, and really do a number on them at the poll.
And as I say, the Republican Party better take their party back, or nothing good going to happen. Eddie, I appreciate you taking a little time for us, giving us your thoughts. I'm hoping for a budget soon, maybe October.
Well, don't lose hope. No, we have to keep fighting.
All right.
No, we have to have the energy. Look, our predecessors had problems, and in every day of life, we have to face challenges. We will meet this challenge. I'm just asking for some help from the people. Call your legislator, especially if they're Republicans. Tell them to stop the baloney. Let's get this thing done for the betterment of all.
There you go. That's why I like you, an eternal optimist. Thanks so much, Eddie.
We can do it. Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you.
Alrighty, our good friend, Pennsylvania State Representative Eddie Day Pashinsky. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Working class heroes, they are the ones who helped to build this land. Working class heroes, they stay united, always saying their name. Working class heroes, with hearts of gold, and always shine so bright.
Volkswagen is full on in crisis mode.
Volkswagen caught red-handed cheating on pollution standards.
Exxon was on the cutting edge of science 40 years ago on climate change, and they ended up instead leading the denial and clouding of public perceptions of science.
Exxon once thought about saving mankind, but funded climate change denial instead.
With this in mind, I will suspend my campaign.
The climate-denying Koch brothers' favorite presidential candidate drops out. Plus,
yeah, I'm Catholic and he could stay home. He's in the wrong country.
Pope Francis is in the U.S. to talk morality and climate, and Republicans freak out.
All of those freakouts and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and Trumpy comment.
How many people here believe in global warming? Do you believe in global warming? Who believes in global warming? Who believes in global warming? Who believes in global warming? Raise your hand. Wow. Not much, huh? Do you have your hand up? Little? No? No. Nobody? One person?
The brain trust at Donald Trump events remains remarkable. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, just a remarkable story concerning Volkswagen in a week of remarkable stories already, frankly.
Yes, the U.S. Department of Justice has now launched a criminal investigation into Volkswagen Motors after the German car maker admitted over the weekend that it installed defeat devices into 500,000 so-called clean diesel cars since 2009. The software gave false readings during emissions testing, according to Bloomberg auto industry analyst Hans Nichols.
From 2009 to 2015, having a so-called defeat device. This is something software that monitors when the car is being tested. When it tests, it emits less emissions. When it actually is out on the road, the particles per unit 10 to 40 times bigger than what it had been. Volkswagen is full on in crisis mode.
All of the affected cars are being recalled. Volkswagen's CEO has personally apologized. Sales of Volkswagen diesel cars have been suspended in the U.S., and now the company could face fines up to $18 billion.
What the hell were these people thinking? They thought they could get away with this?
Yes, they did.
Amazing.
Meanwhile, another new study confirms that air pollution kills millions. emissions. Researchers at UCLA used new data to calculate that outdoor air pollution from burning fossil fuels kills 3 million people every year. The vast majority of those deaths are in China and India, but air pollution kills 54,000 people every year in the U.S. alone.
Yeah, maybe so, but Donald Trump and his followers don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, I consider climate change to be not one of our big problems. I consider it to be not a big problem at all.
So move on.
In politics, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker on Monday dropped out of the 2016 Republican presidential race. Funded by fossil fuel interests like the Koch brothers, Walker is a climate action denier. As governor, he blocked attempts to reduce emissions and weakened Wisconsin's environmental standards.
So sad. So sorry to see him go.
Oil giant Exxon knew in 1977 that burning fossil fuels would cause dangerous global warming. A new investigation by Inside Climate News and PBS Frontline, based on decades of internal documents and interviews with former employees, have found Exxon's own scientists warned Exxon about the dangers of man-made global warming, but rather than heeding those warnings, top Exxon executives chose instead to change direction, giving millions of dollars to create and fund the climate change denial industry, which has successfully blocked any action over the last 40 years that might affect Exxon's profits. Here's former Exxon scientist Richard Wertheimer.
If Exxon had been a supportive participant in the debate about carbon dioxide and climate change, it would have been much easier to get agreement among countries. It would have helped a great deal.
Finally, Pope Francis is in the United States this week to address a joint session of Congress and the United Nations General Assembly, in part to make the moral case for action on climate change. But Republican Representative Paul Gosar of Arizona says that although he is a proud Catholic, he will boycott the Pope's speech and calls climate science, quote, a fool's errand.
And that guy would know. For much more on today's stories and all of them that we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Your proud defender of the working class majority, Rick Smith.
So Janice sent me an interesting web link. One of the things we talk about on the program quite often is education and the people who are really working diligently to destroy public education and privatize it. And, it comes down to the money. Really, at the end of the game, this is a business venture for the billionaires, the hedge fund managers. It's a nice loophole to hide money. And we've continually given, here in Pennsylvania, the EITC, the Educational Investment Tax Credit, hundreds of millions of dollars that in tax breaks that we give to corporations for them to fund whatever their pet projects are. And to me, this is one of those things where you go, okay, I'm going to give some money to my local school where my kid goes so they can have better computers and they can have smaller class sizes. They can do all that stuff. Never mind everybody else, just me. And this is kind of where this is going. But Janice sent me this, the 2014 annual report of the Walton Family Foundation. And not surprising at all. You look at how much money that they spent on education, K through 12 education. They spent, sit down for this, $202 million, over $202 million in 2014 in grants. And they broke it down a little bit into the money that they spent to shape public policy, lobbying. They spent over $80 million lobbying the federal government, the state governments for what? Yeah, you got it. More charter schools, the quote unquote choice stuff. They spent a little over $75 million on their Create Quality Schools initiative. They spent another almost $23 million on improving existing schools, which means more of their charter schools. And then research and evaluation, they spent about $2.5 million on. And then other just whatever educational grants that they gave because, we want to bestow some money on people, almost 22 million more in total, right around $203 million. Now stop and think about this for a second. That's money that we used to go as a society. You know what? We're taking that tax dollar and we're going to spend it on our schools and we're going to strengthen all of the public schools. $80 million on lobbying. Think about that. $80 million on lobbying. This reminds me of our conversation yesterday with Abe Amoros, the legislative director for LIUNA, when we talked about the PPL Center out there in Allentown. They spent, I think, $180 million building it, $83 million of which was spent before one brick hit the ground, before anyone put a hard hat on, before a truck moved in with concrete, before a steel girder hit the ground. $83 million gone. Why? Well, we need lawyers, we need professional architects, we need this, we need that, before a single rock hit the ground. Lobbying over $80 million. And you wonder why. I mean, stop and think about it. You wonder why our laws are the way they are. Because how many parents like you and me who have kids in public school, how many of us are calling our state representatives saying, strengthen public schools? How many of us are going to the board meetings and hitting the Hill, going to Washington or going to Harrisburg or any of the state capitals across the country? How many of us are going, hey, what you're doing with public education is insane? No, we're not. We're on the treadmill, man. We're trying to keep up. But the Walton Foundation, they've got $80 million to just go, you know what? We're going to lobby. We're going to lobby. And we're going to get our laws, which is how we ended up here in Pennsylvania with really some screwed up laws. Why is it that virtual cyber charter schools, why is it that they get the same rate that a kid in a brick and mortar school gets? Because let's not get into this nonsense. This is what the right wing wants. They want us to think about all of the education money that we spend as something that each kid gets. It's their little pot of money and it's theirs, and they should be able to take it wherever. Don't buy into that nonsense. What we should be spending per pupil in this state more than we are, especially in a lot of rural and urban areas. But don't get sucked into that because that's what they want. But if you stop and you think about what we've done is we've moved down that direction. Each kid needs to have this amount of funding. So they've got this calculus. And then they go, oh, well, what we can do right away? We can get rid of the brick and mortars and we can get rid of most of the teachers and all of the stuff. And we can just give someone a laptop and internet access and we'll keep the rest. Which is why the cyber charters, why they push so heavily to get people into them. Lots of pure profit. This $80 million they spent in 1 year in lobbying, that's how we get those screwed up kind of laws. That's how we get into this situation. And as I look at the money that they've spent, and look, they spent a total of $375 million throughout the year. They're also going after the environment. There's a bunch of environmental things that, look, Walmart's big business. But the education, that's what they want. And you look at our laws. Why is it that a charter school gets funded before the local public school? Why is that? Well, it's the lobbying that they've done. It's the groundwork that they've laid. Why is it that the charter school gets a guaranteed amount of what they got the year before for the next year? and not what's available. And you go and you look at, well, why is that important? Look at the Corbett years. We cut budgets each of 4 years during the Corbett years. But the charter schools, they got to maintain most of their funding. So you've got the public schools who have to pay for this. Now understand, they're gonna confuse you with, well, Rick, charter schools are public schools. No, they're public dollars. They're not actually public schools. They're not run by we the people. They're not an elected school board. They're appointed with CEOs. They have a corporate hierarchy, not really answerable to the parents. In fact, they have a much easier time of saying, you know what, little Johnny or Susie, you just don't make it here. Out you go, back to the public school, back. And of course, they get to keep the money. You know, we had a couple of conversations with parents who have been through this, where, you know, within 12 days, they've ousted their kid out of the school because we only want the best and brightest. And yet, oddly enough, and no one's been able to explain this to me, when they get to cherry pick who gets to go to their school, their numbers aren't through the roof. One would think that if you got to pick the best and the brightest, the kids with the most active and engaged parents, the kids who are going to have the leg up, that you would do so much better. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you think that, you know, this is how it would be? But it's not. So it's telling me some weird stuff. It's telling me, well, you know what? Maybe they're not very good at education. They're good at lobbying. They're good at spending money. They're good at promotion. Lots of billboards, radio, TV ads, our tax dollars at work. Lots of that. Not so good at the education part. Now, the Walton Family Foundation spent about $240,000 here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and you'll never guess where they spent it. Yeah, I was looking over their document. They spent $240,000. Actually, to be completely accurate, $239,400 on the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools. Yeah, that's who they support. Not so when you hear them, oh, they spend money on education. No, not so much. Not on the schools that our kids go to. And this is what bothers me. You look at this move toward the charter schools and the cyber charters and all of that. A guy over at, I think it was Politico, did an amazing piece on the virtual school boom and asked the question, who's paying attention to what's going on? He says that there are millions of kids, some as young as 5 years old, who now get all of their schooling online. And he says, look, there's just one problem with that scenario. We don't know if it works. And let me tell you, as someone who's taken a large number of online courses, to me, major waste of time. I should have just taken my library card and gone to the library, which, look, I'm not against. Look, you do that. But if you're talking about educating our children, if you're talking about going that whole route and their entire education being this computer screen, we got some serious problems. And as he points out in the article, since about the mid-1990s, when all of this stuff started popping up, this idea of the virtual high school, they've seen their enrollment, you know, jump by 10% per year. Every year it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, you see more than 160,000 kids in this country who are now in these virtual high schools. And he points out that, you know, public schools in every state offer some form of online classwork. And in 5 states, he says, Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Michigan, Virginia, students are required to take at least one online or partially digital class to graduate from high school. So we're training them to be right here. He points out in 30 states and Washington, D.C., they have fully online schools, Pennsylvania, one of those states, so that they never have to walk into a classroom, never have to sit in a classroom, listen to a teacher, or sit next to another student. They can be in their little cyber world. He points out the Florida Virtual School. They have an international component. So not only are the kids in Florida getting, you know, their neighbors, it's all across the world now. Never have to go near a brick and mortar school. Now, where I live, the school district that we're in, last year they decided they wanted to try something. Instead of having a school makeup day, they were going to have an E-day. And you know what my kids did? Exactly nothing. And really what it was for us, it was an entire day of fighting with them to get them to do the coursework that they were supposed to do. And you go, well, that's just bad parenting on your part. No, what it was is our kids have been put in this situation where they go to school and that's what they do. When they come home, to do an entire day of school is not something they're geared for. And to be honest, a lot of the parents that we talked to had the same experience. The assignments, and trust me when I tell you this, the assignments were mostly group assignments. And you go, well, that's group learning, Rick, don't you know? Yeah, it's called cheating. When I was a kid, one person did it, everyone copied. We're now taking that to the next level. And one of my favorite photos ever, and I wish I would have saved it. About 4 years ago, they had, the Cyber Charter Appreciation Day, and they were tweeting out pictures of themselves in front of their computer screens, and big "I love charters." And there's the one kid he's sitting there with his sign, "I love charters," and he's got two computer screens right there. So he's got two computers. He's got the one that he's doing schoolwork on, that he's supposed to be with the class and maybe taking the test or whatever, and he's got the other one. What's the other one for? It's either playing games or cheating. It's one of two things. And you go, that's not quite the education that I think anyway is what we should be providing. Now, do I support a parent who wants to do the homeschool thing and they want to? Absolutely. God bless you. But as a matter of policy, as a matter of this is the direction we're going as a country, I know very few people who are thrilled with this. And when you look at the statistics, you look at the numbers, because now we've been trained that we have to buy into these numbers, right? We've been trained how'd they do on the tests. They do not do well at all. In fact, you would think that, well, since they're picking the cream of the cream, they've got the parents who are active and engaged, they're going to do better. They don't. In fact, here in Pennsylvania, the 16 cyber schools that we have here, the 16 cyber charters, it's my understanding that none of them made the average yearly progress, the AYP. None. And what I have seen is a lot of, you want to talk about waste, fraud, and abuse? This is ripe with it. And, my favorite always, and I think it will always be, was the Frontier Virtual Cyber Charter School there in Philadelphia, where we actually got to sit in, like, before they went defunct, we would sit in on their virtual board meetings, because you could petition to get their phone number and you can get in on the conference call, and they would hold a conference call over what they're going to do. And one of the things, they're great ideas, a $10 an hour tutor to help kids with math that they were going to put on Craigslist, looking for a $10 an hour tutor. Yeah, good luck on that. And it didn't work. And of the 52 kids that they had, sadly, only a couple of them, a handful, actually ever logged in. And my question continually was, what happens to those kids now that they've lost a year, 2, 3 of their education? What happens to them? What happens to the costs? What happens to our society? What happens? You can be all in favor of, hey, let's try this newfangled thing. But at the end of the day, the consequences are that these kids are now lost. And who's responsible? Do you think the Frontier Virtual Cyber Charter people are going to be responsible? Do you think Governor Corbett's going to be responsible? No, not at all. Sad, sad stuff. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get it. Also, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
When you belong. I walk
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Port truckers and warehouse workers in Los Angeles and Long Beach are striking over a range of issues, from wage theft to misclassification as independent contractors to employer intimidation and bad and unsafe working conditions. Truckers are striking at PAC 9 with picketing at the ports, warehouses, and distribution centers. Shaharya Kauchi is co-director of the Warehouse Workers Resource Center. He says warehouse workers are suffering under low wages and bad working conditions while moving goods for some of America's biggest retailers.
They have to show up every day to find out if they have work, and if they don't have work, they're sent home. They're unpaid. They have a very dangerous workplace. The warehouse was built in the 1940s and is poorly maintained. Workers have gotten injured on the dock because it's poorly maintained. Forklifts are badly maintained. They filed a coalition complaint around this issue. We're calling on other unions and organizations across the region and community to support these workers.
Kauchi says since these workers are on City of Los Angeles property, they should be getting the city's higher minimum wage. And he says huge retailers like Amazon, Lowe's, and others can afford to pay these workers properly and maintain good working conditions.
These workers are moving goods for really big companies. Amazon has a reputation for moving things very quickly and efficiently. Other companies like Lowe's and Kmart are on this site. Also, huge retailers who can afford to pay to make sure that these workers do have good conditions. And the least they can ask is decent wage, a safe workplace, and to be able to know every day if you have a job waiting for you.
Hillary Clinton has been endorsed for president by the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America. Clinton welcomed the support and says as president she will support unions. She vowed to always stand with unions like the UBC against employer efforts to misclassify workers and steal wages, and against Republican assaults on collective bargaining and the right to organize. Clinton is also endorsed by the American Federation of Teachers, roofers, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, and the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry. Union buster Scott Walker's presidential campaign has been busted. The Wisconsin governor claims he was called to lead by quitting the presidential race. Less than 1% support in the polls and running out of cash also had a little to do with it. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says Walker is still a disgrace, just no longer national. The Wisconsin AFL-CIO says the American people have unmistakably rejected Scott Walker's anti-union brand.
Let's get America working. We must build, maintain, and repair our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Teamsters support a bipartisan approach to creating good jobs for American workers. Learn more at letsgetamericaworking.com. Teamsters strong, America stronger.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
The rich pay too much taxes, the poor get way too much. Instead of schools, build prisons and lock the children up. We won't believe those lies again, because God is a Republican.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So the Pope had the big message this morning. D.C., from what I understand, completely shut down. In fact, most of the people I know didn't even bother going to work. So it was fun to try and hunt someone down who were actually there. Yesterday we got to talk to one of the chosen folks, but not so much today. I did find it very interesting that Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley tweeted out while they were sitting and waiting that Democrats and Republicans were actually talking to each other, and that senators and House members were actually talking to each other as they waited for the Pope to come and give his presentation. Could there be hope? Could there be a future? I'm not quite sure, which is why we've asked Christina Lopez G. She's a Hispanic media researcher and reporter over at Media Matters for America to come talk with us. Christina, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
So as I understand, DC's just kind of like blocked off. Nowhere, everything's gridlocked, right?
Absolutely. It's been absolute crisis, and some people are calling it the Pope NATO. The amount of streets that were closed caused an absolute commotion. So a lot of people just stayed home and very few were brave enough to try to make it to work.
So what was the big message? I mean, I saw Grassley's tweet this morning, and I go, wow, the Pope has actually gotten the two sides to talk. The trip worth it already.
I think it was fascinating. It was fantastic how the minute he started talking, he empathized with the nation by saying how he always felt he was a son of an immigrant family. And he felt right at home being in a country that is made up of immigrant families. So right from the beginning, he tapped into the current political narrative by empathizing with the millions of families who are immigrant families, and by empathizing with many who are in the fight for immigration reform. I think it was a great start. And the second message that strongly resonated politically was when he said and commended President Obama for his action on climate change.
Yeah.
As we know, this Pope his message has been very strong in support of action for climate change, and he's advocated for more responsibility on the part of Catholics and other believers to fight for a better environment. And today he repeated those words, and he strongly advocated for society to take more care of the environment and not to leave this in the hands of future generations.
So no Joe Wilson screaming out, "You lie"?
We didn't get that. Not yet, though.
So they must have muzzled him, or maybe that's going to be down the road when he addresses Congress. Who knows?
Maybe they're saving the fireworks for tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Because I look at that in the message that I saw, and the message that I had hoped. Look, I grew up a Catholic, and I grew up in the Catholic Church, and the message as a kid growing up was always peace and social justice.
Right.
The idea that we don't go blowing up people, we don't start wars, and we feed the hungry, we help the homeless, we help the aged, the sick, all of that stuff. That to me seems to be the basis of Christianity, which if we want to be a Christian nation, if we want to keep believing that we were founded by God to be Christians,
right,
then shouldn't we do those things?
Absolutely, and I feel like that has been at the root of this Pope's message, to go back to social justice, the social justice roots of the church. He has been very in tune with the fact that we just came out of a global recession, and his message has been very consistent with that, with going back to helping those who are
the least among
those
us,
among us who are least privileged, and that message has resonated a lot, although not a lot of people like it. We had a lot of figures in conservative media who were very opposed to his message.
Yeah, because not the prosperity gospel. In fact, I saw the Onion that I think it was today or maybe it was yesterday that the Pope has actually reversed his position on all of that and now wants capitalism because there are different kinds of Oreos.
I thought that was hilarious, and that's definitely the simplistic analysis that a lot of figures on conservative media would do, that the Pope simply doesn't get America, or that the Pope has spoken against capitalism because he simply doesn't understand the values, not knowing that you can both have prosperity and just be more conscious that there are those that are less privileged among us, and that economic growth cannot come and have as a prize a lot of inequality, which is what he's always criticized.
I mean, to me, that, and I've been talking about that for the last 10 years on this program, that this growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. And I got to be honest, between, this Pope Francis and the last one, there is a world of difference, kind of like day and night when you're talking about inequality and those kind of social justice issues.
And I feel they both they were focused on different things. This Pope is, by all means, more charismatic, more open to the press. The other one was more hermetic when it came to talking to the press. Not a lot of people knew what was going through his mind, and that has definitely been a lot of difference between both of them. One is more transparent. One is more modern. He's on Twitter. He speaks to the press. He gives interviews, and that's a big jump from what we were used to, which is, a Pope that mostly stayed in Rome, mostly spoke to the people through their encyclical letters, and that for modern times, I feel like this Pope is in tune with the times and knows what the global narrative is and tries to tap into it by sending messages that are consistent with it.
Yeah, although in looking at his Twitter account, he's following 8 people, and I got to be honest, seems a little narcissistic that he's following himself 8 times with 8 different names. No, with 8 different languages. And the amazing thing is this guy speaks all those different languages.
It's fascinating, and how he's going to be delivering speeches in Spanish and English in the U.S., and how he's going to be really close to the Hispanic community in this trip, knowing that most of the Hispanic community is Catholic, and how important his message is to them, because most people in the Hispanic community is more likely to be in situations of poverty in this country, and is one of their main causes and fights is for immigration reform. And those are 2 messages that the Pope has advocated for in his speeches so far.
And one of the things that I think, at least what I look at, is this is a guy who lives what he preaches. When I had read a story not too long ago that he lives in a single room kind of apartment, not even really an apartment, just kind of a single room with a bed and a little table, and that's it. He could live in palatial estates, but he lives very modestly, very simple, and he's a very humble guy. And I think that speaks volumes to who he is in the direction that I think he'd like to see the world go.
He wanted to preserve as much as possible the way of life that he had back in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And for that reason, he didn't want a lot of change. He didn't want a lot of luxury. And he's crusading actually to reform all those traditions in the Catholic Church. He's reforming to changing the structure, changing a lot of roles that had a lot to do with finance and that didn't have a lot of transparency. He's pushing for more transparency and making sure that all the finances in the Vatican do not go unaccounted for.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things he did, I remember, that got my attention is he fired one of the German bishops, who I guess had built like a $43 million residence complex, if you will. And that's one of those things that sticks out in my mind because, growing up in the Catholic Church, I remember that kind of opulence for the priests that the nuns certainly did not get. And especially growing up where I did in a housing project, it was kind of something that you got attention to. But one of those things that gave me hope for him. And I'm going to tell you, I'm thrilled to see the direction that he's gone.
It's absolutely thrilling. And it comes as a breath of fresh air. And I feel like those reforms that he enacted early on were meant to be consistent with the message that he wanted to send about economic inequality, and just beseeching all the governments in the world to be more conscious of those who are underprivileged, and letting those around us, those who are more vulnerable, letting them know that they weren't alone, that there's this new person at the head of the Catholic Church that has their back. And I feel like that's a very powerful message.
Me too. But, here's the thing. Do we listen? And that's, one of the things I tweeted back to Grassley. Okay, you got the representatives talking, Democrats, Republicans, senators, congressmen, everyone's talking, everyone's doing this stuff. Anybody going to be listening to what this guy says? And then moving forward with some ideas on how do we solve the issues of our day, like immigration reform, like mass inequality, like the destruction of public education. Do we go forward on that stuff? Or is it we have a week of the Pope coming in, causing massive traffic jams, and then it's business as usual?
Well, hopefully the message will resonate not only with the political class, but also with activists and advocates for all these fights, and with the public at large. And that way the public at large, if they believe strongly in the message, they can push for these reforms through their vote. And that's, sadly the only way we can go about this in a democracy. But so hopefully the message will not only resonate with the government and the political class, but also it will leave a deep impact and a lot of hope among those activists and those people in civil society who have been actively fighting for change. And this message might empower them to keep on pushing for these reforms and lobby for more.
So as a media researcher and the reporter there, what's the most outrageous thing we've seen so far? I mean, we've seen a lot of hand holding, a lot of love, and a lot of that stuff. Anything really outrageous that you go, other than the idiot from Arizona boycotting it because he doesn't believe God would give us a planet that we could destroy. Anything outrageous?
I feel this visit left conservative media at a crossroads. Once they wanted to politically bank on the Pope to push conservative messages, and it didn't really work for them because this Pope has come against economic inequality, very strongly condemned it. And for conservatives who believe that economic inequality is simply like a result of growth, it just left them at a very odd spot. For example, you had Andrew Napolitano saying in Fox News that this Pope was simply wrong in that this Pope had no idea what he was talking about. And other figures, Michael Savage on his radio show said that this Pope had been hand-selected by the New World Order just because this Pope has advocated for more care of the environment and for more action on climate change. He's been called a Marxist by all these people that were hoping to bank on his conservative message. Rush Limbaugh especially was left in an odd place because he was calling the Pope a Marxist after his climate change encyclical. And it's just interesting to see how whenever a figure cannot use a figure for political purposes, they start trashing it.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. And what the other thing that I thought very interesting is the Pope came out and had some things to say about abortion, which I know a lot of my Catholic friends, their heads almost exploded.
Right. And it's especially in the political narrative that we're having right now, where conservatives are threatening a government shutdown over Planned Parenthood. I feel they were expecting a message from the Pope in that direction to sort of bolster their position, and that message certainly hasn't come yet.
Yeah, and just very, very interesting times. But I'm thrilled to see the Pope here. I hope that it will bring us together, and maybe since we've got representatives and senators and all those people talking, maybe something good will happen. But more importantly, and I think as you pointed out aptly, it's going to bring us together. To where we start tackling some of those big problems. Christina Lopez G, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, Rick. Thanks
really
for
great
having
talking
me.
with you. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I saw it on Fox News!
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. President Richard Milhous Nixon issued the Philadelphia Plan. The goal of the plan was to require building trades unions to admit black members into their ranks. Nixon believed this would show him as a civil rights supporter without having to give in to the more radical demands of the civil rights movement. Affirmative action opponents sued to kill the plan, but they were unsuccessful. Prior to the introduction of the Philadelphia Plan, construction unions nationwide were almost exclusively white. Throughout the 1960s, black workers organized to demand access in construction trades in many northern cities. In Philadelphia in 1967, black workers protested to integrate construction work. This led to federal attention and Nixon's plan. The plan required 6 Philadelphia building trades to create numerical goals for integrating their locals. They had to meet those goals to get federal contracts. Many white construction workers nationwide opposed the plan. Construction workers in Pittsburgh and Chicago held protest rallies. In practice, Nixon had very little interest in strong enforcement of his plan. He wanted to use it to defend himself when critics attacked his administration's civil rights record. Civil rights leaders saw through Nixon's charade. Real progress in desegregating construction work was very slow, and the Nixon administration did little to change that. Still, Nixon's plan was a step however small, at integrating the building trades. Another important step was the founding of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists in September of 1972 in Chicago. Today, the organization has members in more than 1,200 locals and works to increase and support Black members of trade unions. Today, integration of the trades remains an incomplete project.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We're discussing the story of the 1940 Republican nominee for president, Wendell Willkie, a businessman and corporate CEO. After serving in World War I, Willkie took a job as a corporate lawyer with Firestone Tire and Rubber Company in Akron, Ohio. It was there that he became an activist in Democratic Party politics. Within 10 years, Willkie became general counsel of the Commonwealth and Southern Corporation in New York, and just 4 years later, he was named as president and CEO of that company. At a fairly young age, he was rising to the top of the American business world. Like Donald Trump of the 21st century, Willkie remained a Democrat before a sudden change to the Republican Party 1 year before running for president. And like Trump, he had contributed to the primary Democrat he would run against. Join us again for more comparisons between Wendell Willkie and Donald Trump. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Decent days, equality is in play. Workers should organize without haste. Have the vote in your workplace. Work with your manager face to face. Let's go!
So this is interesting timing as far as I'm concerned for the Pope to come, you know, as we're looking down the barrel of another Republican government shutdown. It's just interesting timing. I'm sure not something the pontiff planned, but, you know, interesting enough. I was wondering at some point, you know, you talk about, you know, the message, taking care of the poor, the sick, the aged, the imprisoned. Not surprised that the Pope is going to visit a prison outside of Philadelphia. But yeah, at a time when we're seriously looking down the rifle there of the barrel of the gun there at shutting down over Planned Parenthood, I find very interesting because, as I alluded to in the last segment, you know, the Pope came out and said, you know, we need to forgive folks who have had abortions and bring them into the church, and that whole absolution thing that, you know, I was led to believe if you truly wanted forgiveness, that you were forgiven, that, you know, but you had to want it. You know, that's the kind of thing that, you know, that was emphasized. You can't just go do a bunch of stuff Monday through Saturday and then Sunday go, oh, I'm sorry. That's kind of a lost point. But, you know, and this is where the Republicans need to understand this stuff. You can't legislate every day of the week against the poor, against the sick, against the hungry. You cannot do this and then call yourself Christian and then go and ask for forgiveness or whatever. And as I understand, look, if they do pursue the whole shutdown at the end of the month, what will happen is but you know, tens of millions of people in this country will then go hungry because they're going to lose the food stamp benefits, the TANF. This is according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that if it happens, they shut it down, that's cut off. It's one of those funds that's not there. It says the USDA will not have the necessary funding for SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, to be distributed as normal. They went on to say the USDA will not have the necessary funding for that in October, and it will be forced to stop providing benefits within the first several days of October. So almost immediately, the SNAP benefits get cut off. And, you can go, okay, well, then we just take the congressman's money and the senator's money, and that's not the point. And as I look at this, hopefully this visit will begin to have us as a nation take a gut check of where our priorities are. You didn't hear him talking prosperity gospel. I didn't see a little 800 number underneath his speech going, send money here, we need it. So we can build a bigger arena so you can put money in our buckets. Didn't see that. Didn't hear him say, you give me $5, it's $5 in the bank of heaven. You didn't see that. You saw a guy talking about what I grew up believing. And, one of the reasons that I was out of the Catholic Church is I was at the tail end of that whole, kind of 50s, 60s era, peace and social justice, the activist priests who would give people sanctuary, the activist priests who went into poor communities and helped. No, I had some of them, and then the new wave took over. And when I was a kid, and I remember this like it was yesterday, every Monday the phone would ring, and the person on the other end would go, where's the money? There was no money in the envelope. You came, you put the envelope into church, because if you go to Catholic school like I did, and look, it's not because we had any money. My mother cleaned the rectory and the church, and she did a whole bunch of things, kind of under the table to be able to afford my tuition. They basically gave me a scholarship for her labor. And every Monday would come, because you go to church on Sunday, and you had to have the envelope, and it better be in that basket. Because that's how they knew you went. And you couldn't say, oh, I didn't put one in. I was there, but I didn't. You better have that envelope in that basket. And there better be some money in it. And that's the church that, at the end, it's where I grew up. And it became about the money. And I was very bitter about that as growing up. And I still am, honestly, still very bitter about the whole, the cash fetish that the Catholic Church got into. And from what I understand, there is bad now, if not worse. And my hope was, when Pope Francis came around, was that would change, that we would get back to that message. And look, you give what you can, because I still remember the story of Jesus went to the woman who gave, I think, a penny or two, because it's all she had. And that was, more than the guy who the braggadocious guy with the bravado, and I'm going to give all of this, and look, and it was just a portion. This woman gave what she had. And I remember those stories. I remember growing up with those. And it wasn't the church that I grew up with. This guy, at this moment, I do believe is, and I don't get into religion an awful lot on this program, but I believe this guy at this time has hopefully the ability, or at least the will, to want to change the direction that things have gone, especially within the church. Now, I know some of my friends not thrilled with that, because they like the prosperity gospel. What? God wants me to be rich and more for me? Yeah. And he wants me to screw my employees and everybody else first before they can get me. I kind of have a problem with that. So, we'll see what happens. I mean, will the representatives and the Democrats and Republicans talking, will that help? Will it make things worse? I don't know. But it will be interesting to see. Now, we're going to New York on Saturday. Traffic should be quite interesting finding our way to New York. Let's take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit about the Scott Walker demise. Also, a little labor news, what's going on around the world. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Volkswagen is full on in crisis mode.
Volkswagen caught red-handed cheating on pollution standards.
Exxon was on the cutting edge of science 40 years ago on climate change, and they ended up instead leading the denial and clouding of public perceptions of science.
Exxon once thought about saving mankind, but funded climate change denial instead.
With this in mind, I will suspend my campaign.
The climate-denying Koch brothers' favorite presidential candidate drops out. Plus,
Yeah, I'm Catholic and he could stay home. He's in the wrong country.
Pope Francis is in the U.S. to talk morality and climate, and Republicans freak out.
All of those freakouts and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and Trumpy comment.
How many people here believe in global warming? Do you believe in global warming? Who believes in global warming? Who believes in global warming? Who believes in global warming? Raise your hand. Wow. Not much, huh? Do you have your hand up? Little? No? No. Nobody? One person?
The brain trust at Donald Trump events remains remarkable. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, just a remarkable story concerning Volkswagen in a week of remarkable stories already, frankly.
Yes, the U.S. Department of Justice has now launched a criminal investigation into Volkswagen Motors after the German car maker admitted over the weekend that it installed defeat devices into 500,000 so-called clean diesel cars since 2009. The software gave false readings during emissions testing, according to Bloomberg auto industry analyst Hans Nichols.
From 2009 to 2015, having a so-called defeat device. This is something software that monitors when the car is being tested. When it tests, it emits less emissions. When it actually is out on the road, the particles per unit 10 to 40 times bigger than what it had been. Volkswagen is full on in crisis mode.
All of the affected cars are being recalled. Volkswagen's CEO has personally apologized. Sales of Volkswagen diesel cars have been suspended in the U.S., and now the company could face fines up to $18 billion.
What the hell were these people thinking? They thought they could get away with this?
Yes, they did.
Amazing.
Meanwhile, another new study confirms that air pollution kills millions. Researchers at UCLA used new data to calculate that outdoor air pollution from burning fossil fuels kills 3 million people every year. The vast majority of those deaths are in China and India, but air pollution kills 54,000 people every year in the U.S. alone.
Yeah, maybe so, but Donald Trump and his followers don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, I consider climate change to be not one of our big problems. I consider it to be not a big problem at all.
So move on.
In politics, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker on Monday dropped out of the 2016 Republican presidential race. Funded by fossil fuel interests like the Koch brothers, Walker is a climate action denier. As governor, he blocked attempts to reduce emissions and weakened Wisconsin's environmental standards.
So sad. So sorry to see him go.
Oil giant Exxon knew in 1977 that burning fossil fuels would cause dangerous global warming. A new investigation by Inside Climate News and PBS Frontline, based on decades of internal documents and interviews with former employees, have found Exxon's own scientists warned Exxon about the dangers of man-made global warming, but rather than heeding those warnings, top Exxon executives chose instead to change direction, giving millions of dollars to create and fund the climate change denial industry, which has successfully blocked any action over the last 40 years that might affect Exxon's profits. Here's former Exxon scientist Richard Wertheimer.
If Exxon had been a supportive participant in the debate about carbon dioxide and climate change, it would have been much easier to get agreement among countries. It would have helped a great deal.
Finally, Pope Francis is in the United States this week to address a joint session of Congress and the United Nations General Assembly, in part to make the moral case for action on climate change. But Republican Representative Paul Gosar of Arizona says that although he is a proud Catholic, he will boycott the Pope's speech and calls climate science, quote, a fool's errand.
And that guy would know. For much more on today's stories and all of them that we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, reach out a bomb red. Father, son, left to carry on, blue denim, hell is fate. Oh, he's a working class man.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Lots of things going on in the world of labor, lots of news. You know, starting off with Bernie walking with the striking workers in the Capitol. The hope was the Pope would have met with those, and I thought the guy, James Powell, who wrote the article that The Guardian printed, did a fantastic job of explaining, hey, I make $13 an hour serving these millionaire senators their $19 an hour, their $19 salads. I should be able at least be able to support my kids and not end up homeless. And I got to tell you, thrilled that Bernie Sanders was out there on the picket line. Would have liked to have seen the president put on those comfortable shoes he talked about and get his behind out there as well. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about what's going on across the nation. Labor News, our good friend Doug Cunningham, Workers Independent News. Doug, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, always fun to be with you, man. Thanks for the invitation.
So, good stuff. Bernie out on the line. Like I said, I would have loved to have seen our president out there with him.
Wouldn't that have been great? And I remember that, put on my comfortable walking shoes and walk with you on the picket lines rap. And, we're still waiting in Wisconsin for him to show up here. So Obama needs to show up at these things, and our leaders need to start showing up. Good thing Bernie Sanders was there. And, he was talking about morality and justice, two fantastic subjects to talk about as the Pope visited the Capitol and these workers walked off their jobs. And, Sanders made the point once again, where a lot of people do, and a lot of folks of faith actually make this point too, that you can't have justice when you've got so few having so much, while so many of us have so little. And there's a central moral position that I think every political candidate, every office holder ought to take. Certainly every major world religion talks about the dignity of workers and the poor and upholding them. And so that was a perfect opportunity. Too bad the Pope didn't show up with Obama in tow.
Yeah, that would have been nice as well. But because, the messaging that has to come out of this, and look, you want to buy into that whole Christian nation thing. You've got the guy who's the head of one of the large religions saying, hey, look, we need immigration reform. We need to take care of the climate. We need to take care of each other. I'm hoping that the people who, as Chuck Grassley tweeted out, senators and representatives talking, Democrats and Republicans talking, hopefully some of that talking turned into some listening and then some action.
Yeah, let's really hope that does happen. If you are a person of faith, especially a Catholic, because of the Catholic social doctrine teaching about workers, then you ought to be right in lockstep with the labor movement, and you ought to be doing everything you can to support it. The Archbishop in Chicago had a couple great things to say the other day, talking about the attempts to enact all these so-called right-to-work laws that are really anti-union, and he said that the church is duty-bound to challenge these efforts by raising questions based on long-standing principles of the church. Questions like, do these measures undermine the capacity of unions to organize, to represent workers? Do these laws protect the weak and vulnerable? Do they promote the dignity of work and the rights of workers, really? Do they promote a more just society? All those are very fundamental moral questions, and who better in terms of moral authority for the millions of Catholics around the world than the Pope? And his visit to Washington was a great time for these workers to take their actions. These workers are, as you know, Rick, are employed by private contractors who pay really lowball wages. And they do work at federal government sites. And like you mentioned, that was a great example, the $19 salads that they're serving to the Senate members while they make $13 an hour trying to raise a family in Washington, D.C. It's outrageous. It's immoral, and it should end. And these workers were making that point in D.C. along with Bernie Sanders.
And, the thing is you've got the guy who supposedly, when I grew up in the Catholic Church, we believed, that the Pope had like the bat phone right to heaven going, okay, what should we do on this, God? That he had the direct line. And if you believe that, as a lot of my Catholic friends do, then, the things that he talked about, immigration, justice, those kind of things should resonate. And maybe the 70 million plus Catholics in this country and the 1.2 billion globally, maybe it's time to start buying into that a little bit.
Well, absolutely. And, I'm not Catholic, but I was born in Kentucky, and my grandmother was Southern Baptist, but she was a solid Democrat, very pro-union. And she understood the morality that the teaching, people that follow Jesus should believe in when it comes to workers. And she instilled some of that in me. And she used to warn me, by the way, I'd go out to these little church Sunday school sermons and these church services, literally out in the woods in a tiny little church, Southern Baptist, and there was fire and brimstone being preached from the pulpit. On the way home, before we got to my grandma's chicken dinner, she would tell me what to disregard and what to take to heart about what the speaker said. He was a little extreme on this thing, but here's something really important for you to remember. She would kind of guide me along, and those values guided me all my life. They really instilled in me some real moral values when it comes to workers and the poor. And I don't see why anybody, especially these right-wing evangelicals, if they're serious about family values and they think they really are people of faith, then they ought to join the labor movement.
Absolutely. But you know what I didn't see as the Pope was speaking today? I didn't see a little, little crawl at the bottom of the screen of where to send our donations.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, they didn't pass the plate like we used to do in the Baptist church either. You put your cash in there.
Wow, they didn't. They passed the plate. They made us give them envelopes, and there better be money in it, or you got a phone call on Monday. But let's talk about the other side of this now. You've got the people who want to destroy labor. One of the, I guess, kind of a victory this week that Scott Walker is now back in your state of Wisconsin.
Man,
the whole idea of globally or nationally screwing workers, kind of faded. Now he's just back to you guys in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, and even though he's coming back to us to do his evil deeds here again as governor, I let out a war whoop of a victory cry when I heard that he actually had dropped out because he had plummeted in the race. And, of the most ridiculous things, he ran a ridiculous campaign.
Yes.
This is a shallow man with no wisdom, no understanding of the world, and certainly no real faith, although he pretends to. He said he was called to run for president. Well, when he dropped out...
He was called by the Koch brothers.
Yeah, there you go. When he dropped out in Wisconsin, at the press conference here, he said now he's called to lead by dropping out. So I just wish he would follow that same example here in the state. If he thinks he's called to lead by stepping aside, then please, Governor, step aside here and go off into the obscurity and the wealth that awaits you from your private donors who are going to heap riches upon you, for busting unions here in this state. But the union-busting governor's presidential campaign got busted, and it did not resonate with the American people. And that's what the Wisconsin AFL-CIO said, that his big central platform was always attacking workers, attacking unions, trying to bust them and vowing to cripple unions nationally the way he did attack public workers here. And it just didn't sell.
So let me ask you this then, because, his campaign was set. That was it. He was a one-trick pony. That was his trick. And the Republicans, as crazy as the primary voters are, that message of, hey, let's screw those workers didn't resonate with them. Does that mean that this is something that maybe the party as a whole will take a look at and maybe step away from, or will it just be something that they continue to pursue quietly?
Well, we'll probably continue to pursue it quietly, in all honesty, in my opinion. But look at what Trump is saying. Donald Trump gets up there and says these hedge fund guys don't produce anything. They just shuffle paper, make huge profits. They don't get taxed nearly enough. We need to tax them more. He said the middle class is being plowed under, and that we need to do something for them. Now, whether he means it or not, it's significant that the front runner in the Republican presidential primary race will make that argument, because it's absolutely true. The middle class is getting plowed under, and the hedge fund guys and the rest of the 1% are laughing all the way to the bank, and they need to be taxed more, and they need to be prevented from attacking unions and workers and our rights to organize and our rights to collectively bargain. And, I know that the Republicans won't go that far, but even Chris Christie, the punch the teachers in the face governor from New Jersey, Even he was quoting this 55-year-old construction worker who doesn't care about Donald Trump's business success, blah, 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 because it's more about that worker being able to get a good job and to be able to raise his family. Well, they're acknowledging, at least, Rick, that there is an audience out there, even in the Republican Party, a working class constituency. And so I just keep thinking that if we keep doing our work and keep our shoulders to the wheel, eventually we'll hit a critical mass of the American public, a vast, good, strong majority that will embrace unions, embrace workers' rights, and not tolerate Republican candidates or any other candidates who attack us. I hope that's what we'll get eventually.
You know, as I've been saying on this program, since the Bush recession, look, things are going to get tough, and you're seeing, you know, people putting up with a bunch of you-know-what, because when we've heard this line, I'm just happy to have a job, even though we know for decades men in this country have not just not gotten a raise, but actually seen their wages decline over the last 4 decades. That at some point you're going to hit that critical mass, that point at which we've had enough, we've eaten enough of you-know-what, and that organizing begins, much like we saw during the Great Depression, where this country was literally being ripped apart brick by brick, which is why we got the Wagner Act, to kind of quell that and say, okay, we're going to give you a chance to feed your kids and a chance to at least have a place to sleep. And I think, sadly, those days are coming very soon.
Well, they are. I mean, we're either headed for a complete and utter disaster where everything is broken, where the labor movement's completely smashed and we have no rights, and some semi-fascist leader takes control, and it's all about the corporations all the time, and we turn into an oligarchy like Latin American countries are and used to be in the past, especially. And either that, or we turn the corner and we mobilize the support that we need again to start to grow again and grow our union density. I mean, the American dream, as far as I'm concerned, is inextricably linked to the right, the human right of workers to organize themselves and to collectively bargain. Without that, we're nothing. And Hillary Clinton even said the other day, and believe me, I've burned these words into my brain. If she gets elected, I'll remember this. She got the endorsement of the Carpenters Union. She already has the endorsement of the American Federation of Teachers and a couple of other smaller unions. And she said, I've always stood with union workers, and I will always stand with them to defend collective bargaining and the right to organize. Well, okay, she said that's on the record now, much like the Obama, put the comfortable shoes on routine that he didn't follow through on. But she's at least on the record now saying that. And so when you hear it from both sides of the political aisle, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, maybe there's something here, about workers, and maybe we can demolish once and for all this partisan divide that pits, one party against workers and the other party is only marginally for them, but not always for us in the clinch when it counts. I mean, maybe both parties eventually will realize and wake up and smell the coffee and understand that it will benefit them if they become truly pro-worker.
And we move back to the Eisenhower days. And I often quote, Eisenhower in his letter to his brother Edgar, who said, anyone who would come out against unemployment or labor laws or Social Security, they wouldn't be heard from in our political history. He said there are a couple, but their numbers are negligible and they are stupid. The hope is that we move back to the days where stupid is no longer running things, that we just mock stupid.
I hope so. And Abraham Lincoln, if he were alive today, looking at the Republican field and what they believe about labor, he would be appalled. Because he said labor rights exceed capital rights, that they come first, because everything that capital gets, labor produced, essentially. Even Abraham Lincoln understood that. And of course, he's one of the greatest presidents of all time, and he was a Republican. So, I mean, at some point, we got to smash those partisan barriers. And the one campaign the Teamsters have going on right now to rebuild infrastructure is sort of aimed in that direction, trying to get bipartisan support for common sense things that will benefit American workers, i.e., rebuilding our infrastructure. So there is hope. I mean, I'm not one of those people who think that just because these are dark times and that we've become accustomed to Republicans attacking workers all the time, that's always the way it's got to be. At one point, we always thought the Berlin Wall would be up and the Cold War would always be there, right? But it's not. So we have the opportunity for change. We just can't give up on it in these dark times. We got to keep on working at it.
And as you said, you got to put your shoulder to the wheel and keep pushing. And finally, one of the things that I hear on both sides of the aisle, because coming from Donald, are bad trade deals. I mean, I look at our relationship with China, and now the Chinese president is here in the U.S., and we'll talk in a minute about the Boeing. I guess he met with Boeing today. But, at some point, don't we have to go, we need either better negotiators I shouldn't frame it that way. We need negotiators who are going to prioritize labor and workers and the U.S. over multinational interests. Don't we at least at some point have to be pushing for that, I guess, on both sides of the political divide?
We absolutely need that because there's this disconnect right now because some of these trade negotiators are arguing that this is good for the overall economy, that these trade deals are good for the economy. Well, that's ridiculous. Anything that is bad for working people cannot be good for the economy, quote unquote, because that is the economy. We are the economy. I mean, consumer demand makes up about 70 or 80% of our economy. That is the economy. So anybody who tries to claim on the one hand that these things are good for quote unquote the economy, but they screw workers, it's ridiculous. It's a stupid position. It's not a reality-based position. And yeah, we do need workers, worker representatives actually. So I don't know why we don't have actual union representatives sitting down at the table to help negotiate these trade deals. It's sort of like Germany has workers on their boards of directors of the corporations there. You know, we need a worker presence whenever anything economic at any level, especially high level, is being decided. And we need them at the very beginning at the table, not on the sidelines as being handed a fait accompli of some agreement that ends up being bad for working people. And sooner or later, Rick, I do believe that this will dawn on us as a nation, that what's good for workers is good for the actual general economy, both in the world and in our country. And we do need those people at the table.
I hope you're right, because the reason we're not at the table right now is we're on the menu. And at some point, we've got to crash that restaurant. Now, the Chinese president here, I guess he met with Boeing, right?
Yeah, and he landed, of course, in Seattle area, right? And Boeing says it's planning to build a Chinese facility. They call it a completion facility, not a production facility. I spoke with John Holden today, the president of IAM 751 out there in Puget Sound, that represents 35,000 Boeing workers. And he told me that they are very upset about the fact that this new Chinese facility is being done. It's being proposed anyway. And the point that they're making is it's not just about China in their mind. It's about taking work away from Washington State. And even though this completion facility is supposed to only take 737s that are built in Washington and then paint the bodies and do some final assembly on those, even though that's true, remember, they got $8.7 billion, Boeing did, in tax incentives in Washington State over a decade's time, and yet they're shipping work out.
Yep.
So they're at the IAM in Washington. They're working with bills right now in the state legislature to tie that $8.7 billion in tax incentives specifically to a number of jobs that have to be retained in Washington. And as Holden told me, we'll have that in Workers Independent News for the morning. He says they're trying to get some leverage to have more capacity and capability placed right there in Washington State. And he says the Washington citizens deserve that, especially after giving those tax incentives.
All right. You know, you look at that, and to be honest, the Chinese have got it right. Because I understand they were going to buy, the big announcement was they bought 300 planes. And
right, yeah.
You know, I don't know if those were already things that they had ordered down the road or what it was, but 300 planes are going to build. But with it comes, you have to bring jobs to our neck of the woods. That's how you do things. We can't always be the one going, okay, buy stuff and we'll give you all of our jobs. We can't keep doing that. We got to have somebody who's, can we get this Chinese negotiator to come over and do it for us? Can we outsource our negotiating?
Yeah, let's hire him away from them. That's just the thing, and it's not just jobs either, Rick. It's research and development for manufacturing. It's manufacturing capacity and capability, the physical structures. You know, all of that is updated when they build new ones over there, and they don't build them here. So I mean, we're losing a lot, not just the jobs. That's bad enough, but we're also losing the research and development, and you know, we're losing other things. And China actually requires that. If you're going to sell in their market, you got to build some plants there and crank out the products there. They do it with autos, you know, Buick and other American companies over there, and they've done it right down the line. So yeah, we definitely need better negotiators, but we need also the labor to be at the table. And this Boeing union, IAM, it says it's going to do everything it can to fight. If this new Chinese facility means more work taken away from Washington State, they're going to do everything in their power to fight that and resist that.
Well, good for them. Doug, I appreciate the updates. Great talking with you. Look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely, man. Anytime you want to invite me, if I have time in the schedule, I'll certainly try to be here. It's been fun, Rick. Thanks.
Good talking to you, Doug. Thanks so much. Doug Cunningham, Workers Independent News. Quick break, right back. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Corporations get billions of welfare, while millions in this country don't have a dime to spare. Corporations get billions of welfare, while millions in this country don't have a dime to spare. Millions in this country don't have a dime to spare. Multi-billions in this country get not a dime to spare.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Phil Gramm, the former right-wing senator from Texas, has surprised me. I had assumed he had zero charitable instincts, for he kept trying to kill such poor people's programs as food assistance. We're the only nation in the world where all our poor people are fat, he smirked. But Phil seems to have developed a new empathy for people who are demonized. Although he's now a Wall Street operative, Gramm returned to Capitol Hill in July to express solidarity with victims of bigotry in our country. Wow, Gramm standing with Black Lives Matter and oppressed immigrants? No, not them. The former senator was testifying against a new rule requiring corporations to reveal the spread between their CEO's pay and what their workers get. It's demagoguery, Phil grumped. Then he lurched into the abyss of absurdity by wailing that overpaid corporate chieftains are actually, get this, victims of public bigotry. The multimillionaire snarled that the one form of bigotry that is still allowed in this country is bigotry against the successful. To prove this bizarre claim, Gramm cited the specific case of his buddy Ed Whiteacre, who retired as CEO of AT&T in 2007. Ed was widely condemned for grabbing a $158 million retirement package for himself as he went out the door. Gramm practically wept as he related the sad story of Whiteacre's heartache. The guy was actually underpaid, wailed Gramm. If there's ever been an exploited worker, he was exploited. It was an outrage. Odd, since the former senator had never previously expressed the slightest concern about exploited workers. This is Jim Hightower saying, perhaps Gramm could do a telethon to support ex-executives like Ed, who suffer such soul-crushing bigotry. Please give till it hurts, and don't laugh, for Phil really feels the pain of the rich.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Kind of to wrap that up, think about this for a second. You've got the Chinese president coming here saying, yeah, we're going to buy 300 of your big boats there, the big planes, but you're going to have to build a facility in our country. You're going to have to bring some employment our way. We used to think like that. We did. At one point there was, trust me, I know it's been a long time, but we used to have negotiators who used to think this way. We weren't always bought and paid for by the corporate special interests. We didn't always have the multinational corporate special interest leading our public policy. At least I'd like to believe we didn't. Or maybe they were just different. Maybe they had some nationalistic tendencies. Maybe they were going to wave the flag, or who knows. But think about that. Think of how smart that is from the Chinese president's perspective. Okay, we need planes. We're going to buy, we're going to build, we're going to have some, we're going to fly them around our country. We're going to do all this stuff. But you got to build them here. And they've done that with every industry. You could tick down the line. Where Mexico screwed up, and this is probably where the Chinese learned the lesson. When we passed our agreement with Mexico, we gave them spatterings of our industries, made them assembly plants. Okay, if you were making a bicycle wheel, they would make the spokes. Or if they were, they were building, an airplane, they would, the wheel. We'd give them pieces. The Chinese are brilliant. They want it all. They want to be able to retro engineer our stuff. They want to be able to have the entire operation, not just the manufacturing, the grunt assembly work, but actually everything else that goes into it, the machining and all of the stamping and all of that. They want it all. And what they'll do, and with Boeing, this is one of those first steps. We've now got an agreement to build a completion plant, which is that first step that gets them to taking things apart and retro engineering them. And then you know what? You're going to see a Chinese Boeing pop up, because we've given them the technology and the ability to build some of this stuff. And as soon as that stuff's happening, when you give up the research and development, when you give up the R&D part of it, you have a brain drain. And then, after a generation, you've got people who don't have those skills anymore. and then you can't get it back. This is what our insane trade policies have given us. This idea that we can everything manufacture somewhere else. We'll just be the idea people. Well, let me let you in a little secret. At some point, they don't need the idea people, because they create their own idea people from the people who are tinkering and the people who are doing the manufacturing and all the stuff on the ground. That's how we did it. So, we're giving that away, and that's what's really very frustrating. Very frustrating to me when you see these stories pop up and no real outrage. I saw the story this morning, and what did I see? I saw, China's buying 300 planes from Boeing. I didn't see the other part of it until we talked to Doug, and then I looked it up. This is why we need to take back our corporate-controlled media, right here in a nutshell. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Port truckers and warehouse workers in Los Angeles and Long Beach are striking over a range of issues, from wage theft to misclassification as independent contractors to employer intimidation and bad and unsafe working conditions. Truckers are striking at PAC 9 with picketing at the ports, warehouses, and distribution centers. Shaharya Kauchi is co-director of the Warehouse Workers Resource Center. He says warehouse workers are suffering under low wages and bad working conditions while moving goods for some of America's biggest retailers.
They have to show up every day to find out if they have work, and if they don't have work, they're sent home. They're unpaid. They have a very dangerous workplace. The warehouse was built in the 1940s and is poorly maintained. Workers have gotten injured on the dock because it's poorly maintained. Forklifts are badly maintained. They've filed a coalition complaint around this issue. We're calling on other unions and organizations across the region and community to support these workers.
Kauchi says since these workers are on City of Los Angeles property, they should be getting the city's higher minimum wage. And he says huge retailers like Amazon, Lowe's, and others can afford to pay these workers properly and maintain good working conditions.
These workers are moving goods for really big companies. Amazon has a reputation for moving things very quickly and efficiently. Other companies like Lowe's and Kmart are on this site. Also, huge retailers who can afford to pay to make sure that these workers do have good conditions. And the least they can ask is decent wage, a safe workplace, and to be able to know every day if you have a job waiting for you.
Hillary Clinton has been endorsed for president by the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America. Clinton welcomed the support and says as president, she will support unions. She vowed to always stand with unions like the UBC against employer efforts to misclassify workers and steal wages, and against Republican assaults on collective bargaining and the right to organize. Clinton is also endorsed by the American Federation of Teachers, roofers, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, and the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry. Union buster Scott Walker's presidential campaign has been busted. The Wisconsin governor claims he was called to lead by quitting the presidential race. Less than 1% support in the polls and running out of cash also had a little to do with it. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says Walker is still a disgrace, just no longer national. The Wisconsin AFL-CIO says the American people have unmistakably rejected Scott Walker's anti-union brand.
Let's get America working. We must build, maintain, and repair our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Teamsters support a bipartisan approach to creating good jobs for American workers. Learn more at letsgetamericaworking.com. Teamsters strong, America stronger.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So, Democratic chairman of the House Gaming Oversight Committee, Nick Kodak, he's got a great idea. We could maybe solve our budget problems with some sports betting. He plans to introduce a piece of legislation that would legalize our ability to bet on our favorite sports teams in Pennsylvania's licensed casinos. Maybe that's the way forward. Maybe liquor and gambling and vice. That's how we do it. Maybe we privatize the whole kit and caboodle and everything would be wonderful, right? I don't know. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about maybe that and the budget that has turned into something of a pie fight. I've asked Stephen Herzenberg. He is the executive director of the Keystone Research Center. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Happy to do it, Rick. Good to be here.
So what do you think? Should we legalize sports betting? That could solve our budget problems, right?
No, I think we should stop ducking the issue and be adults and figure out what things we have to pay for to create a better Pennsylvania and go ahead and pay for it.
How about or English only? That'll solve our budget problems, right? If we pass English only and we stop printing things in other languages, that could close our $1 billion budget.
$40, as I heard. I heard some story. I think you were there earlier this week that there was an estimate at some earlier point where that was discussed, and somebody concluded it would save $40.
Yeah, well, $40 is a start, right? I mean, you can check your cushions, man, because it seems that's what we're being told we have to do to close our budget holes is start looking in the cushions and start hawking off the furniture.
Yeah, I mean. God forbid we actually tax the drilling companies like every other state that has big natural gas companies. God forbid we actually ask the folks in Pennsylvania, at the top, who've done really well in the last several decades when nobody else has, to pay a little bit more. What we need to do is to get serious about, again, taxing the drilling companies, asking people with the ability to pay just a little bit more, and restoring the kind of educational opportunity for all kids that we need and that everybody believes in. So you're right to make fun of the latest gimmicks that people claim might allow us to duck the fact that sometimes you have to pay for things to do things together. And we need to invest in our collective future. It actually makes a better Pennsylvania for everybody, not just for the kids and families that benefit most directly.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing. And what we've been told is we can cut taxes. We can do away with property tax. We can let the drillers off. We can cut corporate net taxes. We can do all these things. And all we have to do is do it on the backs of the poor. That seems to be the message I'm getting from a lot of my Republican friends, because there's all this largesse out there. Those poor people, they're taking everything. And that's how I guess we're told we have to do this, right?
Yeah, I mean, whether people really think we can do it all on the backs of the poor, or I think, again, the more fundamental issue is just a complete unwillingness to have a serious conversation about, what it costs to do the things that we need to do to make Pennsylvania a great place. That's the conversation.
Right.
Ever since Reagan, really, that America has sort of more than other places really struggled with this idea that taxes are the price of civilization. And taxes again are how you invest in the community, invest in public schools, so every kid has a chance in life. This budget is about values. I mean, that's one of the things that's been at risk of getting lost in the last few days and few weeks of budget shenanigans in Harrisburg, right? Sort of, the Republican leadership and the Republican legislature has been trying to drag Governor Wolf into the pit, the Harrisburg pit, with them, and drag him away from, again, the vision, a fresh start for Pennsylvania, a vision where we do restore educational opportunity for all kids, where we use that property tax relief as well as the education funding to help the communities and families in communities that most need help. So again, I think what's really important in this budget debate is to get back to the fact, to the values, and to the kind of Pennsylvania you want. Do you want Pennsylvania in which all kids have a good school and all communities have a chance to thrive? Or do you want a Pennsylvania in which the rich people get to keep every penny and the drillers don't pay a penny? I mean,
that seems to be the options we're giving. Were you surprised, in the last bit of public pie fighting that the governor gave? It appeared to me the governor gave a lot more than maybe I would have, that I would have wanted him to give, and that the Republicans didn't take it and run. Were you surprised? Because I look at the pension compromise, I look at the liquor store compromise, and I go, wow, huge, massive, or as Donald Trump would say, huge compromises.
Yeah, well, at one level, I'm not that surprised that they didn't take him up on it, because again, it seems in terms of the process, if we're lucky, there's a division in the Republican Party and in the Republican leadership. There's a division between do we want to focus simply on inflicting a big loss on this new Democratic governor? Is our priority to take the governor down in a partisan way in which, nobody wins and Pennsylvanians hate all of it at the end of the day, but it doesn't matter because we've got safe seats, but let's take him out in 4 years. It's a battle between that, and then there is absolutely an impulse in some members of the Republican legislature and leadership. There is an impulse to solve problems and get things done. And so I wasn't that surprised, because so far that the battle between, is this about a wrestling match? Is this about a takedown? Is this about destroying a governor rather than helping Pennsylvania? It's been pretty clear that that's the impulse that's winning out at the moment.
So what you're saying is, Jake Corman and Mike Turzai and Scott Wagner and a bunch of the other ones maybe might have their eye on wanting to take on the governor in a couple of years, and that's where this is coming from?
Whether they just want to take the governor down, or whether some of those folks themselves want to take the governor on, that's another element of it. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's part of the impulse. I mean, and again, it's not just, that's how politics is played in Washington, and politics is a contact sport. And so, yeah, inflicting defeat on the other party rather than solving problems it's not news to your audience that this is a strong impulse in American politics.
Right. But here's the thing. You look at the polling though, Steve, and at some point, even the Turzais and the Cormans and the Wagners have got to look at the polling that's showing that that the people of Pennsylvania are looking at them with the jaundiced eye and going, hey, it's your fault, not so much the governor's.
Clearly, that's at least the most recent poll that I've seen, which now was a few weeks ago by Franklin and Marshall. I think it was 54% of the folks responding held the Republicans in the legislature responsible, and 29% held the governor more responsible. So yeah, as of that point, you're right. You'd hope that at some point, some combination of public discontent and pressure. And, again, I know a lot of legislators, and I don't know many that don't have, within the complex of emotions that drive what they do, I don't know many that don't have in part a public service ethic. So I do think that there's, there's a moment when that together with the practical might fit together, or pressure they're receiving. And so, hopefully within some period of time, I wouldn't predict how many weeks or months, but within some period of time, you hope you get to a situation where everybody says, okay, fine, we have to get a budget, and there is genuine compromise where, my preference for compromise is not that one side says, we'll take two of your worst ideas that we hate the most, and you take two of our ideas that you hate the most, right? Let's take four really dumb ideas and combine them into a budget. Is that the problem solving is a little more creative than that?
I'm with you.
So whether it's on pensions, where again, it's certainly part of what the governor proposed that I've got reservations about, but maybe if you're careful, you could do a version of what the governor talked about that's not too much of a step backward.
Yeah, because I look at the pension thing, and I got to be honest, not thrilled with the whole idea of moving to a 401k style for anyone. In fact, I keep saying, as a nation, we've got to start looking backwards and going, maybe we should be going not just state workers, but all workers looking to get back to defined benefit plans, because obviously the defined contribution, the 401k is not working.
Absolutely. A complete failure in terms of retirement security in the private sector. And also a failure in terms of much more expensive, as you know, than a traditional giant defined benefit pool, because when people invest on their own, they don't make the returns they get are not as high, and also the costs they have to pay for their individual 401k savings account to Wall Street are much higher. So I'm with you that particularly for public sector employment, where it is very stable and lots of people stay for a career, and that's part of how you hang on to the folks that make schools and state agencies that make them hang together and improve quality. I've got reservations about the direction that the governor's already gone in. So far he's still talking about preserving the core defined benefit for, the middle class or for most workers in the public sector, which is something that I don't think can be compromised away. But again, you got to understand the governor's position. He's got to give them something. It is divided government. In one area, property tax relief, again,
it's something they should both agree on.
They do agree, and in that area, they unfortunately haven't taken him up on it. In that area, he tried to be really creative. He tried to take a Republican priority, and he shaped it somewhat to align it with his own interest in helping struggling families and struggling communities. Like cities in the inner suburbs and older small towns and rural areas, helping struggling communities come back. And so to me, that's a really creative approach that really does give Republican champions of property tax relief most of what they want, if they'd look carefully at his proposal. But again, so far, to me, that's actually Exhibit A in terms of the fact that the Republicans are still focused taking him down rather than on solving problems.
And that's the sad part of it.
Because if they really did want to find places where they could compromise, where there's enough similarity between their objectives, property tax relief was the place to start. And they had some good discussions, according to news reports, back in April and May. But and they could pick that issue up again in the future. But for the moment, they've set it aside in order so that, again, the Republican leadership so far is basically posturing, whether it's the original budget, which was the fifth Corbett budget or the first Corman-Corbett budget, or whether it's the most recent stopgap, which is sort of a third of the Corbett budget.
Right.
If you didn't like a whole loaf, how about a third of a loaf?
Yeah.
Huh?
So let me ask you, last line of questioning then. Will we be singing "I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas" or are we "I'm Dreaming of a Budget"? Does it go that far? All I want for Christmas is a budget instead of my two front teeth. What are we looking at? Or don't we know?
I mean, again, this is uncharted territory because we've never had, I don't remember what the exact makeup of the legislature was in Governor Rendell's first term, but it was a lot less Republican. Maybe even the House was Democratic. Do you remember? In 2003, I should remember.
I thought that the Democrats had I thought it was a 1-seat advantage in the House.
In the House. So this is uncharted territory. Obviously, there is going to be the costs of not reaching a budget are going to grow over time, and so. But whether or not we reach that threshold, in October or in November or in December, I can't predict. But again, I do think that the people who support Governor Wolf and frankly the Wolf administration itself needs to really double down on hey, what are the values differences here? And if they can get back to, they believe in educational opportunity, and they believe in helping struggling communities, and they believe in drilling companies paying their fair share. Those are three values that Pennsylvanians strongly support. And so if we can shift back to, hey, what's the vision for Pennsylvania? What kind of Pennsylvania do you want? Which budget gets you that kind of Pennsylvania? Then maybe there'll be more public pressure on the Republicans to give the governor more of what is a really attractive vision with majority support.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Instead of what it's become, which appears to be an ideological pie fight.
Right.
And the hope is that maybe by having some pressure, maybe we push them in the right direction. Steve, I appreciate you taking a little time for us, giving us your expert insight. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, Rick.
Dr. Stephen Herzenberg, Keystone Research Center's Executive Director. You want to check out their website? Just go to thericksmithshow.com, click on Steve's name, take you right there. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We're on the road to nowhere. We're on the road to nowhere. We're on the road to nowhere.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. President Richard Milhous Nixon issued the Philadelphia Plan. The goal of the plan was to require building trades unions to admit black members into their ranks. Nixon believed this would show him as a civil rights supporter without having to give in to the more radical demands of the civil rights movement. Affirmative action opponents sued to kill the plan, but they were unsuccessful. Prior to the introduction of the Philadelphia Plan, construction unions nationwide were almost exclusively white. Throughout the 1960s, black workers organized to demand access in construction trades in many northern cities. In Philadelphia in 1967, black workers protested to integrate construction work. This led to federal attention and Nixon's plan. The plan required 6 Philadelphia building trades to create numerical goals for integrating their locals. They had to meet those goals to get federal contracts. Many white construction workers nationwide opposed the plan. Construction workers in Pittsburgh and Chicago held protest rallies. In practice, Nixon had very little interest in strong enforcement of his plan. He wanted to use it to defend himself when critics attacked his administration's civil rights record. Civil rights leaders saw through Nixon's charade. Real progress in desegregating construction work was very slow, and the Nixon administration did little to change that. Still, Nixon's plan was a step, however small, at integrating the building trades. Another important step was the founding of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists in September of 1972 in Chicago. Today, the organization has members in more than 1,200 locals and works to increase and support black members of trade unions. Today, integration of the trades remains an incomplete project.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We're discussing the story of the 1940 Republican nominee for president, Wendell Willkie, a businessman and corporate CEO. After serving in World War I, Willkie took a job as a corporate lawyer with Firestone Tire and Rubber Company in Akron, Ohio. It was there that he became an activist in Democratic Party politics. Within 10 years, Willkie became general counsel of the Commonwealth and Southern Corporation in New York. And just 4 years later, he was named as president and CEO of that company. At a fairly young age, he was rising to the top of the American business world. Like Donald Trump of the 21st century, Willkie remained a Democrat before a sudden change to the Republican Party 1 year before running for president. And like Trump, he had contributed to the primary Democrat he would run against. Join us again for more comparisons between Wendell Willkie and Donald Trump. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. From the Sloan Center there at Boston College, they have a new fact out that 4 in 10 service workers have access to retirement benefits, and only 2 in 10 actually participate. Now, that's completely different from the management class, the quote-unquote professional class, in folks who, at the top of the scale, who have 80% of them, 8 in 10 have access to retirement plans, whereas 74% of them actually take them up on it. And, this is an interesting moment in time. And again, you look at these dividing points. You look at the gaps between the haves and the have-nots. You look at those who are gating themselves off in their gated communities, in their high-rise office towers, wherever. They get retirement plans. They get education for their kids. They get the rest of us, the people who do the work, not so much. And I think this is another one of those moments. You've got the professional class, the upper middle or the upper class, if you will, who for themselves, they have retirement benefits. For themselves, they have most certainly a high standard of living. For everyone else, not so much. And you look at the fact that, of the service sector, which we were told, when I was growing up, we were told that was going to be wonderful. We'd all be pushing papers around. We'd all have corner offices, and it's going to be great. We were going to all do service sector jobs because Reagan talked about the service economy, and this was going to be much better than that dirty manufacturing, making stuff economy. And you look at the differences. When I first got my job, first real job out of college, I was making good money. Healthcare was something we expected as part of, I got a job, I got healthcare. Pension was there as well. You know what? I got the job. There's going to be something of a pension there. And then they started moving us away. Oh, get these wonderful 401ks. You'll be a millionaire. You'll be a millionaire. And then they started taking that away. Because I remember at one point there were companies that were to get you to switch over because they wanted it. There were some that wanted voluntary because they had contracts and stuff, with those unions. So they were enticing people with like $1.50 for every dollar you put in, up to like 6%. And you would be an absolute idiot not to put 6% in to get the $1.50 matching. You'd be an idiot to do that. I'll be honest. That sounded like a great deal, but you had to know wasn't going to last. Most people I know today who have 401k plans, it's really nothing more than a savings plan with the employer throwing in, a couple of bucks here or there. It's not what we were told it was going to be. So you look at this situation where, the service sector workers, the people who are, cleaning up after us in hotels, the people who are serving us our lunch, those workers at the Senate dining hall who are on strike, making $13 an hour because you've got this global behemoth who provides the services there. No pension for you. Nothing for you. It's insane. I mean, it's really insane what we've allowed to happen in this country. But I got to be honest, not surprising that for themselves, pension plans. For everyone else, no, not so much. Are you surprised?
I'd be interested in what. Do you have a 401k? I'm interested. Are you thrilled with it? Is it something that's working well for you individually? What about your friends? Is it something that's going great? Going, yes, I want more. I think we all want more, because the last number I saw, the average 401k in the country, about $18,000. And I got to be honest, I don't know that's something you can retire on, unless you only want to live a year or maybe 6 months. I plan to live a very long life, and retirement to be not one in poverty. Yet it seems that's where we're heading back to. Sad. And this is why, again, with the Pope being here, the hope is that, we really start pushing our elected officials. Simple stuff. Quick break, right back.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Volkswagen is full on in crisis mode.
Volkswagen caught red-handed cheating on pollution standards.
Exxon was on the cutting edge of science 40 years ago on climate change. And they ended up instead leading the denial and clouding of public perceptions of science.
Exxon once thought about saving mankind, but funded climate change denial instead.
With this in mind, I will suspend my campaign.
The climate-denying Koch brothers' favorite presidential candidate drops out. Plus,
yeah, I'm Catholic and he could stay home. He's in the wrong country.
Pope Francis is in the U.S. to talk morality and climate, and Republicans freak out.
All of those freakouts and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and Trumpy comment.
How many people here believe in global warming? Do you believe in global warming? Who believes in global warming? Who believes in global warming? Who believes in global warming? Raise your hand. Wow. Not much, huh? Do you have your hand up? Little? No? No. Nobody? One person?
The brain trust at Donald Trump events remains remarkable. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, just a remarkable story concerning Volkswagen in a week of remarkable stories already, frankly.
Yes, the U.S. Department of Justice has now launched a criminal investigation into Volkswagen Motors after the German car maker admitted over the weekend that it installed defeat devices into 500,000 so-called clean diesel cars since 2009. The software gave false readings during emissions testing, according to Bloomberg auto industry analyst Hans Nichols.
From 2009 to 2015, having a so-called defeat device. This is something software that monitors when the car is being tested. When it tests, it emits less emissions. When it actually is out on the road, the particles per unit 10 to 40 times bigger than what it had been. Volkswagen is full on in crisis mode.
All of the affected cars are being recalled. Volkswagen's CEO has personally apologized. Sales of Volkswagen diesel cars have been suspended in the U.S., and now the company could face fines up to $18 billion.
What the hell were these people thinking? They thought they could get away with this?
Yes, they did.
Amazing.
Meanwhile, another new study confirms that air pollution kills millions. Researchers at UCLA used new data to calculate that outdoor air pollution from burning fossil fuels kills 3 million people every year. The vast majority of those deaths are in China and India, but air pollution kills 54,000 people every year in the U.S. alone.
Yeah, maybe so, but Donald Trump and his followers don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, I consider climate change to be not one of our big problems. I consider it to be not a big problem at all.
So move on.
In politics, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker on Monday dropped out of the 2016 Republican presidential race. Funded by fossil fuel interests like the Koch brothers, Walker is a climate action denier. As governor, he blocked attempts to reduce emissions and weakened Wisconsin's environmental standards.
So sad. So sorry to see him go.
Oil giant Exxon knew in 1977 that burning fossil fuels would cause dangerous global warming. A new investigation by Inside Climate News and PBS Frontline, based on decades of internal documents and interviews with former employees, have found Exxon's own scientists warned Exxon about the dangers of man-made global warming, but rather than heeding those warnings, top Exxon executives chose instead to change direction, giving millions of dollars to create and fund the climate change denial industry, which has successfully blocked any action over the last 40 years that might affect Exxon's profits. Here's former Exxon scientist Richard Wertheimer.
If Exxon had been a supportive participant in the debate about carbon dioxide and climate change, it would have been much easier to get agreement among countries. It would have helped a great deal.
Finally, Pope Francis is in the United States this week to address a joint session of Congress and the United Nations General Assembly, in part to make the moral case for action on climate change. But Republican Representative Paul Gosar of Arizona says that although he is a proud Catholic, he will boycott the Pope's speech and calls climate science, quote, a fool's errand.
And that guy would know. For much more on today's stories and all of them that we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
So as I understand it, the whole area in Washington, D.C. blocked off. It's like a quarantine zone. So I thought it'd be good that we maybe find someone within the quarantine zone to find out what's going on. That's why Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service, is here. Justin, what's going on inside the Pope zone?
Hey, well, just to counteract what you said, it's not all blocked off. In fact, there are quite a few holes within the perimeter. One could even say that Washington, D.C. right now is very holy. Get it? Get it?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Good for you. I would not quit my day job, but good for you for thinking that one up. It's very holy. So I understand that you just saw the Pope give what, Mass, right?
Yeah, he is right now at the National Basilica, which is actually in my neighborhood. So I decided just to take a stroll down and check it out. Ended up getting in without tickets, which was a little bit interesting. Yeah, so he just delivered Mass and is also performing the canonization ceremony for Junipero Serra, a California missionary who's a pretty controversial figure over his treatment of Native Americans. So that's going on today. This is actually the first canonization on American soil, so that's some fun Catholic history for your listeners to keep that faith out there for them. But yeah, this is following his arrival ceremony today at the White House, which marked his first official comments to the U.S. This was something where he embraced the president's climate change message, essentially complimenting him for trying to take on air pollution, and then going on to say that he believes that climate change, one, is an urgent issue, and one that needs to be solved in this generation and not the next. So a pretty political message, if you can consider that to be political, coming off straight off the bat as sort of a preview for what we can probably expect for tomorrow's address to a joint session of Congress.
Now, I just don't see it as political. I see it as just kind of a common sense thing. You go, we got this planet. If you believe, there are a lot of people who may not believe in God, so not to offend them. But if you believe that God created the planet for us to use and to enjoy and all that, okay, great, and He did. But I don't think He gave it to us that we just tear it up. Like I give my kids stuff. I don't want them tearing it up. I want them to use it, have fun, whatever, but not just destroy it. And I think that kind of a common sense thing, not really a political thing in my view.
Yeah, and even beyond common sense, I think it's sort of a perhaps moral message, which is coming from the Pope, who I guess is a moral leader. That would sort of exceed the political aspect of it, I would imagine.
All right, good. So they let you in because I was under the impression that everything was packed there. They had everything sealed off. Nobody could get in or out, and it was going to be just jam and gridlock. You just walked in?
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm not in that ticketed area. It's a long story. It's a small neighborhood. But regardless, the statements about this being jam-packed and overrun with, people coming here has been a little bit overstated. Initially, that was the concern, but a lot of people ended up taking telework opportunities today, ended up staying home, ended up using public transportation. So a lot of the town really, frankly, feels like a ghost town to a certain extent. I'll make a holy ghost town kind of joke, but I think I may go to hell if I do that one.
Go ahead, make your holy ghost joke. Let's hear it.
No, I just did holy ghost town.
Oh, okay. Yeah? See, I thought there was more to it.
It wasn't very funny. I'm sorry.
You're safe. You're not going anywhere over that one.
Yeah, no, okay.
All right, good. So, I mean, it's good. I'm glad the Pope's in town doing some stuff. Good. Maybe, as I understand, the senators and the congressmen, they were talking. Democrats and Republicans were talking this morning as they waited for the Pope, because Chuck Grassley tweeted that out. So maybe while they were talking, maybe they decided to listen, and who knows, maybe they won't shut the government down at the end of the month.
That would be hopeful, but regardless, the White House has indicated that they are planning for a government shutdown to take place, saying that it would be imprudent for them not to. They're also saying that senior administration officials are going to be staying in town during this sort of issue in case there could be any way to break the impasse at the last minute. But right now, it doesn't look like there's hope on the horizon to avoid a government shutdown. We have McConnell tomorrow bringing on a standalone bill to defund Planned Parenthood as a way to try to placate conservatives. He's following up on that with a separate vote on funding the government, just a standalone of this attempt to try to, cross a bridge with conservatives. We are nevertheless hearing a lot of, more extreme members of the House and Senate calling for the shutdown to continue until Planned Parenthood is securely defunded, meaning that they're probably not going to drop that opposition, and we could very well have the government shut down again.
Now, what I find interesting, though, is, the pontiff is here talking about, those Christian values of, taking care of the sick and, the helping the poor and feeding the hungry and all that stuff. And as soon as he leaves, they're going to shut everything down and starve, millions of people across the country, because the USDA pointed out that they don't have enough money to go but a week into October if the government shut down. So no food stamp benefits for folks, and families will be hungry. That's a good way to send the Pope back to Rome, I think, right?
Yeah, it's almost as if Republicans could be a little bit sanctimonious. How about that?
It's just kind of mind-blowing on a certain level that we've become used to this kind of hostage-taking politics, that and there isn't a revolt against that. I don't know. Struggling.
That's a very good point. But the message that the Tea Party has gone with was, or has been so far, that there simply is not enough hostage taking. And in terms of political engagement, they're the ones who've really been able to really shake cages, particularly in the primary seasons. So until Democrats step up something equally as crazy, which I frankly don't want. I don't want my party to be in the same line as the Tea Party. We're probably going to see the continuing push for more and more insanity until they get exactly what they want. But it's just my apocalyptic vision, I guess. This entire Pope thing's making me a little bit cynical.
Yeah, okay, well, but the sad reality is you're probably right. Okay, and finally, it looks like the presidential debates are scheduled all in a line. Can we have like 100 of them? Could we have like everyday debates?
No, it looks like we're just going to have about 4 that are going to be taking place. We're having one that's going to be we're going to be I actually don't have the debate list in front of me right now. I memorized it before I left, but I forgot it, so I apologize to your listeners. But it looks like it's going to be in Virginia, St. Louis, as well as Nevada, and
my home state of Ohio.
Thank you so much. State in Ohio as well.
Is going to be kicking off at Wrong State University.
26th. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, going to be kicking off at the Wrong State Wright State University there in Dayton, which okay, good. I'm looking forward to it.
There we go. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to the Vegas one in particular. That's usually a fun town to go to for politics, and usually one that leads to some pretty bad behavior for everyone involved. So there we go.
Yeah, big fun. Well, I'm gonna let you go so you can go back out and hang out with the Pope there and rub elbows and kiss rings and all that stuff.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service, there with the Pope. Hey, what kind of sway do we have when we get somebody standing right there with the Pope? Let's take a quick break. Right back.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Phil Gramm, the former right-wing senator from Texas, has surprised me. I had assumed he had zero charitable instincts, for he kept trying to kill such poor people's programs as food assistance. We're the only nation in the world where all our poor people are fat, he smirked. But Phil seems to have developed a new empathy for people who are demonized. Although he's now a Wall Street operative, Gramm returned to Capitol Hill in July to express solidarity with victims of bigotry in our country. Wow, Gramm standing with Black Lives Matter and oppressed immigrants? No, not them. The former senator was testifying against a new rule requiring corporations to reveal the spread between their CEO's pay and what their workers get. It's demagoguery, Phil grumped. Then he lurched into the abyss of absurdity by wailing that overpaid corporate chieftains are actually, get this, victims of public bigotry. The multimillionaire snarled that the one form of bigotry that is still allowed in this country is bigotry against the successful. To prove this bizarre claim, Gramm cited the specific case of his buddy Ed Whiteacre, who retired as CEO of AT&T in 2007. Ed was widely condemned for grabbing a $158 million retirement package for himself as he went out the door. Gramm practically wept as he related the sad story of Whiteacre's heartache. The guy was actually underpaid, wailed Gramm. If there's ever been an exploited worker, he was exploited. It was an outrage. Odd, since the former senator had never previously expressed the slightest concern about exploited workers. This is Jim Hightower saying, perhaps Gramm could do a telethon to support ex-executives like Ed, who suffer such soul-crushing bigotry. Please give till it hurts, and don't laugh, for Phil really feels the pain of the rich.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. New satellite imagery reveals that Russia is building more than an airbase in Syria. According to the Wall Street Journal, Russian troops are constructing another 2 military bases in the country's northwest. Russia's grand plan for Syria remains unclear, but American officials noted on Monday that Russian surveillance drones are now operating in the country and that manned fixed-wing aircraft sit on Syrian runways. Housing facilities designed to accommodate up to 2,000 personnel have also been constructed in recent weeks. The president of Yemen, Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi, has returned to the city of Aden, his first time back in the country in more than 6 months after Houthi rebels sieged the capital Sana'a and then overran Aden in the spring. Hadi's return is a big victory for Saudi Arabia, which sees stability in Yemen as a key national security interest. Saudi Arabia began a military campaign to retake Yemen back in March and has since looped in 11 additional countries, including the U.S., for various types of military support. And speaking of Saudi Arabia, UN human rights experts are appealing to the kingdom to halt the execution of Ali Muhammad al-Nimr, a 21-year-old arrested as a 17-year-old during Arab Spring protests in 2012. Al-Nimr's conviction is rife with problems, but his plight has piqued the attention of Western media due to the fashion in which he is set to be killed. Saudi authorities plan to behead Al-Nimr and then display his head atop a crucifix for public display. If it goes forward, the execution would cause Saudi Arabia to violate the terms of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which forbids the imposition of the death penalty upon those who were a minor at the time of their offense. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe?
Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
These are words you should have told the truth. You're lying and a traitor, and now we got the proof. Where you gonna run to? Where you gonna hide? They wanna put a door down. No one's getting out alive.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So it is now, I guess, okay for us to sing a happy birthday to you without fear of being sued. Evidently, yesterday, a federal judge invalidated the decades-old copyright to the song "Happy Birthday to You." So now we can sing to each other, really badly droning on. If you've been to "Happy Birthday to You," now we can do that without the fear of, oh, if I drone on poorly, I can be sued. Evidently, this judge ruled that it's not the words. So we can do the song. We can badly butcher the poor song, and not fear being sued. It's the melody that you can't. So I gotta wonder, can we not hum it? If we sing the words, that's one thing. But humming, can we not hum? I know it sounds dumb, doesn't it? What's interesting though is this whole saga, if you will, over the "Happy Birthday to You" song has seen the likes of 2 world wars, several eras of copyright laws. It's seen, the old vinyl, the old 78s, cassette tapes, 8-tracks, CDs, now into the digital era. And I got to be honest, I always thought it was dumb that you couldn't sing it without fear of being sued. And not like they would come to your house and sue you. But as I understand it, a number of food chains who used to do that whole silly, come to your table and sing, they were getting sued for royalties from what I understand. Think about that for a second. But, according to the article that I read, the reality is the copyright had been paying something like $2 million a year to the people who owned it. The people who had the license, which is this Warner Chappell Music. And, they bought it for like $15 million, years ago. And they're the people who have it. And they want their money because we have the copyright, our money. So this judge said, no, you own the melody. Maybe we can't hum it, but the words, something very, very different. So kind of interesting. So go ahead, sing the bad song. Butcher it if you have to, in wishing your young ones a happy day. And on a sad note, very sad note, Yogi Berra passed on yesterday, 90 years old. And everyone knows Yogi. Even if you look, I never saw a game Yogi Berra played in. I think he retired from baseball in like 1953 or something. But I think anyone who's ever played a sport knows the name Yogi Berra and the Yogi-ism of "it ain't over till it's over." Of course, Yogi. But there are a ton of, and I thought it was. I thought for a bit, I think back to some of the Yogis that I remember, like the lousy teams are good this year. Because he had that kind of, of language and thought process, and I knew a guy who was much like that. He was thinking things, and they just came out in the most hysterical ways. Of deja vu all over again. Of course, of course it is. But there are a bunch of them that got your attention. If you don't know where you're going, you might wind up someplace else. Why buy good luggage? I only use it when I travel. Lots of those funny things. Sad, but here's the guy who's played. I think some of the things that he said or
supposedly it said he had written a book not too long ago of the Yogi Berra story. Something along the lines of not everything I said, I think was the name of it. And because a lot of those dumb things then got attributed to him because he became a cultural icon in that way. But here's a guy, a baseball career, Hall of Fame career, inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think it was 1972, where he says, you thank you for all the people who made this, or to you people that, made this so that it was necessary to you. Forget that. It's stuck in my mind until just a minute ago. But he was just one of those great, lovable guys. But an amazing baseball player, played in more World Series games than any player in the history of the game. And had more World Series rings. 15-time All-Star. Really just a great baseball player, but we remember him for it ain't over till it's over. And nobody goes there anymore because it's too crowded. Oh, I love that. But it's a sad day, and I wish him and his family well, and just an amazing guy. But here's again, with the Pope in town on Saturday, I guess going to be in Philadelphia Saturday, Sunday. Should be interesting to see what the traffic situation's like there. But again, you come back to this, in talking about this push to end income inequality, this push to fix our broken education funding system. And, it all comes back down to the budgets that we put forth. I look at what's going on right now here in Pennsylvania with our budget fight. And sadly, it's turned into more of a pie fight than an actual discussion of priorities and the idea of governing. And that's what's frustrating to me, because I believe the budget's a moral document. It lays out what your priorities are. And if we look at it in those lights, the priorities of our Republican friends are simple. It's more for them, less for everybody else. It's more control and power to corporate special interests. It's more accumulation of wealth in the hands of the few. And then, the rest of you scurry. And, this is one of those bizarre kind of conversations I have with my working class Republican friends, because I don't get it. I don't get what draws to that party, just like they don't get what draws me to the Democratic Party, because look, half of the Democratic Party might as well be Republicans, because it's a lot of the same corporate, understand, they all feed at the corporate trough. They have to. It's the game that's been set up. It's the rules of the game that they've set up and we've allowed to happen. That's really the reality in this. So, when you look at the parties go, well, they may want to do the right thing, but at the end of the day, their corporate masters are telling them what they have to do. And at the end of it, it comes down to, how much more of this are we going to put up with? How much more are we going to allow? Because I do believe in conversations with even some of the most radical people that I know, we all want similar things. We all want decent jobs that we can go home at the end of the day in the same condition we went with, without having to worry about being killed at work or contracting some bizarre ailment. We want to be able to support our families and put our kids through schools in good, safe schools with teachers who are qualified and care and all. We all want that Americana that we were raised with. We all want that Leave It to Beaver kind of existence for our families, where everyone gets along and everyone has opportunity, and everyone, when they get sick, they're taken care of. When they're hungry, they get fed. When they're naked, they're clothed. All of that stuff, which is kind of what the Pope is laying out. And that we become welcoming communities, and that we may have disagreements, but we find a way to move forward even with them. And I struggle sometimes, doing this program, going at some point, this has got to change. And I look at what our governor has done here. I may not be thrilled with the idea that he came out with, okay, you want some privatization into the liquor system? We'll have a private management company manage the state-owned stores. We'll get out of the management part of it, But the workers are gonna maintain their jobs. The standards are gonna stay in place so that we make sure that it doesn't become a saturated environment. I don't like it, but I understand where he's coming from. Just like I don't understand and I don't like the whole idea of moving the state's pension fund into a 401k kind of situation for some. Because to me, what you're then doing is you're divvying up part of that pot. And that's going to be much more costly down the road. That's what bothers me. Now, I understand the governor wanting and having to do it, because that's what compromise is about. And I'll be honest, I am surprised. Actually, I'm shocked that the Republicans didn't take it and run, because it really was almost everything they wanted, with a big, giant, pretty bow on top. But we'll see what the coming days bring us. I hope we're singing "I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas" instead of dreaming of a budget. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial